Chapter 1844. It was midsummer and cicadas were chirping outside the courtyard. The hot weather made people upset and even affected the mood of the chess players. If you don't think about it carefully before you play, I'll win this game again. Qiguan Rang held a feather fan in his left hand and waved it gently. Every feather was white and clean. The handle of the fan was made of flawless white jade. The pendant of the fan was a beautiful lotus flower. The long tassels hung down and piled up on his knees. From afar, it looked like a thick cloud that was about to disperse. He sat on a mat with a complicated chess game in front of him. The person sitting opposite him was Fengzhen. There were rumors in the court that Qiguan Rang and Fengzhen didn't get along. In reality, other than their conflicting political views, they had a good personal relationship. For example, right now, the two of them could play chess together in the middle of summer. There was a plate of golden melon seeds on Qiguan Rang's left. Fengzhen also had a plate, but there weren't as many as he had. Fengzhen looked at the losing game and hesitated. After thinking for a long time, he threw the flag back into the box and mumbled, "I lost, I lost." He didn't just lose this game, he also lost a few golden melon seeds _ smiley face angle, _ your heart isn't calm. Qiguan Rang won another game, but there wasn't any joy in his expression. Fengzhen tidied up the chessboard out of boredom. He didn't care about how many golden melon seeds he'd lost to the guy in front of him. How can I calm down? The summer is hot and dry, but the court is chaotic. His Majesty has been sick for 3 days in a row. Fengzhen, who was usually fearless, was a little scared now. He had followed His Majesty for many years and His Majesty had always been a model worker. He fought bravely and worked hard. Occasionally, he would slack off, but it didn't matter. 365 days a year, he never rested for a single day. He was always making trouble for the court officials. No one in the court dared to slack off, but now he had been sick for 3 days in a row. Every day, Fengzhen had the energy to leave early after finishing his work. Today, he still had the time to play chess with Qiguan Rang. He was so bored he doubted his life. Qiguan Rang's expression was calm, his deep eyes as quiet as a deep pool. It made people want to calm down. Everyone has 3 disasters and 9 difficulties. It's common to be sick and miss court. It's just a 3-day court. Fengzhen couldn't help but roll his eyes. What did he mean by, just a 3-day court? I'm worried about His Majesty, Qiguan Rang sneered. What are you worried about? His Majesty did not delay government affairs. Fengzhen said, I'm worried that His Majesty wants to protect CI with all his might. At this time, 5 days had passed since the meteorite incident that the two of them had planned. Her Majesty had claimed illness and called off the court 3 days ago. However, she had taken many actions in private. It was obvious that she wanted to exert pressure on them and continue to protect Wei Ci. Even though Fengzhen and Wei Ci were childhood friends, having a good personal relationship did not mean that they shared the same political standpoint. Wei Ci was dragged into the circle of aristocrats led by the Wei family, and those aristocrats were ambitious. From this point of view, Fengzhen and Wei Ci were on opposing sides. No matter how good their personal relationship was, when it came to political affairs, they still had to fight to the death. At most, on the anniversary of Wei Ci's death next year, Fengzhen would offer him a few more sticks of incense and pour him a few more cups of wine. If he allowed the landowning households to seize power, he didn't know what would happen to the world that had just begun to take a turn for the better. Fengzhen had no choice but to do so. Coincidentally, Qiguan Rang was also making a move, so Fengzhen joined forces with Qiguan Rang. The two of them naturally did not give Wei Ci a chance to make a comeback. They also knew where Wei Ci's weakness was. Wei Ci's birth date was the biggest obstacle to his ascension to the top. As long as Wei Ci fell, the Wei family that relied on Wei Ci and the other restless landowning households would also temporarily lie low. Unfortunately, Everything had been well planned, but Her Majesty just had to drop the ball. After the meteorite fell, Her Majesty did not show much emotion on the surface. However, Fengzhen had known her for many years and naturally knew that she was angry. She was not angry that Wei Xi had betrayed her trust, but angry that Fengzhen and Qiguan Rang had taken matters into their own hands. It would have been fine if she was just angry. Fengzhen was confident that he was unharmed, but Her Majesty had called off the court for 3 days in a row. This was a great calamity. She could still hold on the first day, but on the second day, she tossed and turned restlessly. On the third day, she was dazed and could not concentrate on playing chess with Qiguan Rang. Qiguan Rang said, "It is expected that Her Majesty wants to protect Wei Xi." Fengzhen was speechless. If that was the case, why didn't she say so earlier? Qiguan Rang smiled calmly. "Wait a little longer, there is no hurry." "How can there be no hurry?" Fengzhen sighed. "Her Majesty now wants to force the two of us to give in. As long as we don't give in, she may call off the court for another day. To put it blasphemously, there are millions of men in the world. Why does Her Majesty have to be so stubborn about them?" Her Majesty was so afraid of the landowning households, but Wei Xi had repeatedly helped the scholars from the Wei family. If not for the fact that the scholars recommended by Wei Xi were all talented, Fengzhen and Qiguan Rang might not have been able to endure until now. Qiguan Rang snorted and said in a low voice, "Heroes have a weakness for the charms of a beautiful woman. This has been the case since ancient times. Besides, he is Her Highness's biological father. If Wei Xi really dies in our hands, Her Majesty may not be affected, but Her Highness's side is different." Fengzhen said, "You don't intend to let Wei Xi die? If Her Majesty wants to protect him, can you and I touch him? If Her Majesty does not protect him, then Wei Xi is dead. If Her Highness holds a grudge against him, then so be it. After all, his old bones may not live to see the day Her Highness ascends to the throne. Who cares about what happened in life after death?" Qiguan Rang placed a chess piece. "If Her Majesty wants to protect him, it's not good for us as officials to disobey. However, we have to take a step back in this matter. If we can protect Wei Xi's life, then we have to give up his official career. If we can achieve our goal, we can also answer to Her Majesty. If they could let Wei Xi die, that would be the best. They would completely eradicate the Wei family's support in the court. If not, then they would take a step back and let his official career be ruined. As Her Highness's biological father, Wei Xi's identity was too sensitive." Qiguan Rang also suspected Wei Zong's identity. Once this father and son pair had uncontrollable ambitions, the good situation would be destroyed. Qiguan Rang would not allow Wei Xi to have the slightest hint of ambition. Fengzhen was speechless. "You really aren't afraid that Her Majesty will be angry with you?" Rather than saying that Qiguan Rang was dealing with Wei Xi, it was better to say that he was using Wei Xi to negotiate with Her Majesty. Qiguan Rang was blocking his official career. Her Majesty should know that Wei Xi has seriously overstepped his authority. She can't bear to give him a warning, so I will be the villain. On the 5th day of the court strike, Qiguan Rang entered the palace dressed neatly in court attire. "I thought I wouldn't be able to wait for Wen Zheng's arrival." Her Majesty, who claimed to be ill and unable to attend court, was now wearing light and simple daily attire, sitting in the pavilion and playing with birds. Qiguan Rang's expression was solemn. "Your Majesty, I have something to say." "It's about Zixiao." Her Majesty scattered a handful of bird feed on the caged birds. "He has also been warned. Let's end this matter here." Qiguan Rang was speechless. "I know what Wen Zheng wants to say and what you are worried about, but Zixiao doesn't have that ambition," Qiguan Rang said helplessly. "Whether he has ambition or not isn't the key. He shouldn't be so close to the Wei family and betray Her Majesty's trust." Her Majesty said, "To be honest, it's not that close. It's just a normal human relationship, but it was exaggerated by those despicable people. Wei Ci was the most popular member of the Wei family in the court. Who didn't want to curry favor with him? With just a slight response, their friendship was deliberately exaggerated to 13 points. Zixiao is a person who cherishes talents. The Wei family is in a bleak situation. It's reasonable for him to be soft-hearted and promote someone who can be cultivated in the family. Her Majesty stretched out her fingers to play with the birds. Her lips curled into a slight smile. However, he has no ambition, but others can't be sure. It's good to take this opportunity to make him step down so that he won't be plotted against and used again. In this way, you and Zisher can rest assured. Qiguan Rang heard the last sentence and pretended to ask for forgiveness. Forget it. Sit down. There's no need to ask for forgiveness. Her Majesty stopped him. I know what you are worried about. Qiguan Rang and the others joined forces to deal with Wei Ci. She was indeed unprepared, but she knew it was an opportunity when she calmed down. An opportunity for Wei Ci to retreat to a safe position. At the same time, Jiang Pengji had to spare some time to sort out the Wei family. Qiguan Rang was the one who planned all this. After 5 consecutive days of court, she had calmed down. Naturally, she would not continue to argue. She had previously worried about how to separate Wei Ci from the Wei family. Now she had achieved her goal. Qiguan Rang hesitated and asked Her Majesty in a low voice. Has Her Majesty talked to him about these things? Her Majesty was surprised. No. What's there to talk about? Qiguan Rang wanted to say something but stopped. In the end, he did not voice out his worries. As long as Wei Ci was far away from the center of power, the Wei family could not cause trouble, and the position of the first prince was stable. Qiguan Rang's goal would be achieved. I hope Zixiao can understand Her Majesty's painstaking efforts. Her Majesty asked Qiguan Rang, why should he understand? Qiguan Rang was speechless. Some things could easily cause misunderstandings without saying anything. Who in the court did not know that Qiguan Rang hated Wei Ci? This hatred lasted for more than 10 years and reached its peak on the day of Her Majesty's death. Wei Ci's son, Wei Tsong, came to the palace after Her Majesty's death and threatened the position of the first prince, Jiang Yan. Qiguan Rang was one of the important ministers who entrusted Jiang Yan with his son. Under his seemingly pale and calm face, there was a strong desire to kill the Wei family's father and son. Wei Tsong was rebellious and ambitious. He coveted the throne. Who told him his identity and taught him to do so? What role did Wei Ci, his father, play? Perhaps, he should not have kept Wei Ci alive that year. Because of this, when Wei Ci drew his sword and committed suicide, firmly denying Wei Tsong's identity as crown prince, Qiguan Rang only looked away coldly. At the same time, he regretted watching coldly from the sidelines for a full 23 years. He did not let it go until he died. Your Majesty, there is one thing. I have sinned, and my sin is unforgivable. The white-haired Qiguan Rang was lying on the sickbed. His pale and sickly face was strangely flushed. This was the appearance of the last radiance of the setting sun. If I had not treated you coldly that year, perhaps the former emperor would not have. This is not your fault. Jiang Yan, who had ascended to the throne for 23 years, looked calm. So many years have passed. Why are you still brooding over it? Jiang Yan did not blame him, but Qiguan Rang could not let it go. On his deathbed, he only had one wish that he hoped Jiang Yan could fulfill. After I die, I will not enter the ancestral land. Qiguan Rang's voice was as weak as a mosquito, but Jiang Yan could understand what he meant. I understand. Many years later, people discovered that the grave of the famous minister Qiguan Rang was a cenotaph. While scholars were struggling with this matter, Emperor Chen's mausoleum collapsed. People discovered that other than Emperor Chen, there was an unfamiliar male corpse buried with him in the main mausoleum. His identity could not be verified. An unfamiliar male corpse was also discovered in the official hall of Emperor Chen's mausoleum. The owner of the corpse was 70 years old. This person was not buried with the emperor. Instead, he was buried in the official hall of the mausoleum. According to historical research, the owner of this corpse should be an old minister of 2 dynasties, Qiguan Rang. Genius in a second, remember this website's address. Mobile version. Chapter 1845. Qiguan Rang had always rejected the idea of having a son. He had made up his mind to have a dozen daughters, but he had a son on his 3rd child, and his 4th child was still a boy. Qiguan Wei looked at her husband's long face, and her heart was beating fast. "It's my fault that I couldn't give birth to a daughter for you. But the child is your flesh and blood after all." Qiguan Rang looked at his youngest son who was being carried by the wet nurse and said emotionlessly, "He has already given birth. What else can I do?" He couldn't put his son back to be remade into a daughter, so he could only accept the reality no matter how disappointed he was. Qiguan Rang didn't like his son, but he treated his daughter like a treasure. It wasn't because he wanted to make a scene or to show off, but because he really liked his daughter more than his son. Qiguan Jinghui and the 2nd Nyangzi who entered the Golden Scale Academy 2 years ago. Qiguan Rang was very strict with his homework, but his only legitimate son was lukewarm. Although he didn't neglect him, he was obviously not as diligent as his daughter. Qiguan Wei felt a lump in her throat, and her eyes turned red. Qiguan Rang softened and comforted her, saying that it was the same to have a boy or a girl. In fact, he didn't have anything against his son. Qiguan Wei was speechless. He didn't dare to say that to his eldest son. Did he feel guilty when he said that? Obviously, the word guilty didn't exist in Qiguan Rang's life dictionary. The scale of his 2nd son's full moon banquet was only half of his eldest son's, not to mention his 2nd daughter's. His colleagues wanted to congratulate Qiguan Rang for having a son in his old age, and those who tried to flatter him were trying to please him. However, they were stunned when they saw the situation. The scale of the 2nd Longjuan's full moon banquet wasn't embarrassing, but it didn't match Qiguan Rang's status as the 2nd legitimate son. Qiguan Weisher looked at her 2nd son, sighing and sighing. Usually, when people gave birth to a son, they would hold a big banquet, invite guests, and have a lot of fun. But when it came to her own son, she was treated coldly. Fortunately, she had a good relationship with her master, and there wasn't any conflict between them because of this son. But as a mother, which mother would be happy to see her own child not loved by her husband? She was naturally upset. When her father, Wei Yuan's 2nd wife, who was also Qiguan Weisher's stepmother, came to visit her, she couldn't help but look a little worried. The 2nd wife said, "You're thinking too much. After so many years, how can you not know the personality of the person sleeping next to you? No matter how much he valued his son, he wouldn't really neglect the old man in your arms. At most, he doesn't dote on me as much as he dotes on his daughter. Why do you have to worry yourself over this?" The 2nd wife was only a few years older than Qiguan Weisher. Rather than calling them mother and daughter, they were more like close friends of the same age. They didn't hold back on some heartfelt words. In the eyes of the 2nd wife, Qiguan Rang was indeed a rare good man. Ever since he got married to Qiguan Weisher, he only had this one wife by his side. Even when he went out to war, he did not flirt with other women, nor did he accept any beauties that his subordinates fawned on and showed filial respect to. If it weren't for the good relationship between husband and wife, Qiguan Weisher, who was almost 40 this year, wouldn't have given birth to a pearl in her old age. Furthermore, Qiguan Weisher had also experienced an extremely disgraceful past. If Qiguan Rang really wanted to get a concubine, Qiguan Weisher wouldn't be able to stop him. Not only did he not get a concubine, but he only had one wife all these years. He also didn't learn from the scholars in the past to have a masculine lifestyle. If there was anything wrong with him, it would be that he liked his daughter too much. Qiguan Weisher smiled bitterly and said, "Humans are always greedy. I thought that the old man could make him happy, but I didn't expect. Sigh. Many colleagues were invited to the 1-month banquet, but the scale of the banquet wasn't big. When people heard that it was a son, they didn't dare to give gifts. In the entire imperial court, Qiguan Rang was probably the only one who didn't allow a big banquet after giving birth to a son. The second wife said, "Now you say that you don't like him, but maybe you will like him after a few years. The child's appearance is good." Qiguan Weisher looked at her son's appearance. It was delicate and beautiful. It looked much more attractive than an ordinary baby. Her heart was slightly moved. How about raising him as a daughter? Qiguan Rang rejected his wife's suggestion. A son was a son. Why would he pretend to be a daughter and raise him? If something bad happened to him, he might not be able to tell his own gender in the future. Instead, he might get masculine. If that was the case, Qiguan Rang would personally take a stick and break his son's third leg. Qiguan Weisher was speechless. The older the old man was, the worse his temper was, and the harder it was to serve. As an advanced pregnant woman, her recovery speed after childbirth was slower than when she was younger. Naturally, she couldn't take her son out to meet the guests. Therefore, someone else did it for her. In the end, about 2 hours later, her son was gone. Where was her son? Where was her big, precious son? Qiguan Rang said, "Princess Lian likes him. Take him back and raise him for a few days. It won't be a problem." Qiguan Weisher was speechless. After being married for 20 years, it was the first time that she wanted to divorce the old man. Here's what happened. When the wet nurse took second Lang Jun out to meet the guests, an important person appeared and pushed the atmosphere of the 1-month banquet to the climax. Princess Lian, who was only 3 years old but had a decent appearance and temperament, came down. She accepted the greetings of Qiguan Rang and the other officials and then asked them to stand up. She then sat on the main seat that Qiguan Rang had vacated. Mother is busy with political affairs and can't spare any time. When she heard that you have a son, she specially asked me to come here. Qiguan Rang said, "His Majesty is very busy every day. Such a small matter is not worth disturbing the emperor." Her Highness Lian blinked her eyes as a smile appeared on her lips. "You are an important official in the court and my mother's right-hand man. How is this a small matter? Can I see the little Lang Jun in your house?" It had been 2 years since she started learning to read at the age of 1. Many officials had heard that Princess Lian's learning speed was even slower than that of a 7 or 8-year-old child. They used to think that it was exaggerated. Now that they saw it, they couldn't help but sigh. The royal family was indeed extraordinary. Qiguan Rang called the wet nurse over. The wet nurse carried the little Lang Jun and bowed to her with reverence. "Isn't this my sister?" Princess Lian, who had been arrogant all this time, finally let out a sigh of relief when she saw someone younger than her. She was obviously curious, but she still restrained herself from taking too big of a step. She didn't dare to forget the etiquette taught by the Grand Tutor. Seeing the baby in the swaddling clothes, Princess Lian broke down. Qiguan Rang said, "The child looks like a girl, but he is indeed a boy." Princess Lian said, "Then this little brother is the best I've ever seen. Want to pinch, ***, but she wasn't a 1-year-old child anymore. She was 3 years old. The Grand Tutor also said that she couldn't casually pinch others and had to be steady." Qiguan Rang looked at Princess Lian's adorable expression, which showed that she wanted to get closer but was trying to restrain herself. He couldn't help but feel his heart soften. "Your Highness, do you want to take a closer look?" Princess Lian nodded. "I want to hold him." The child's wet nurse couldn't help but make a bitter face. Although Princess Lian was the eldest legitimate child of the emperor and it was the child's fortune that she wanted to hold the child, he was still only 3 years old. Qiguan Rang said, "Bring the little Lang Jun over." The wet nurse was speechless. What else could she do? She could only pass the little Lang Jun, who had drunk milk 15 minutes ago, to Qiguan Rang, who then passed him to Princess Lien. The wet nurse didn't have the right to get close to the child. They thought that Her Highness Lien would fall while carrying the child. Some of the courtiers were secretly worried, but Her Highness Lien held the child very firmly. Oh, they forgot that Princess Lien's birth mother, the Emperor, was born with divine strength. As the legitimate child, Princess Lien naturally couldn't be compared to an ordinary child. Not only was she holding the child firmly, but she also looked relaxed. It didn't take any effort at all. It just looked a little awkward. Dear official, the little Lang Jun and I are fated. He didn't cry even when I held him like this. The baby's bones were soft. Princess Lien carefully held the back of the child's neck and couldn't help but breathe in the fragrance of the baby's milk. A big baby, a cute big baby. She didn't know if it was because of her younger sister's influence, but Princess Lien not only had a preference for good looks like her mother, but she had also learned from her younger sister to have a preference for cuteness. The little Qiguan Langjun in her arms was handsome and adorable. He immediately hit Princess Lien's cuteness spot. Qiguan Rang was a man who wore a thick, Princess Lien, filter. Naturally, he would say yes to everything. The wet nurse could only choke speechlessly. To prevent the child from crying during the 1-month banquet, she had to coax and feed him beforehand. Princess Lien held the child for a while before returning him to Qiguan Rang. But during the banquet, she couldn't help but look around. He's so cute, asterisk asterisk. I want to hold him again. It's best to bring him home. So, Princess Lien drank 2 cups of fruit juice and ate some side dishes, but she was still distracted. She actually made it until the banquet was about to end. Dear official, I have a presumptuous request. Qiguan Rang said, Your Highness, please speak. Princess Lien said, I see that my dear official's youngest son is very fond of him. I feel that we are fated. Can you let the little Lang Jun be a guest in the palace for 2 days? Qiguan Rang hesitated. My son has just turned 1 month old. I'm afraid he might disturb your highness. Princess Lien said, I will send someone to take care of the little Lang Jun. He won't be disturbed. Qiguan Rang agreed. Wei Ci, who was attending the banquet, saw this and had a bad feeling. He wasn't worried that Princess Lien was a naughty child who would bully a 1-month-old baby. After all, he was the child of His Majesty and himself. He had personally taught him for 2 years. He was careful and meticulous. He didn't dare to make any mistakes. Now, Princess Lien was quite graceful at such a young age. Not only did she talk and act well, but she was also good at taking care of people. This was reflected in the way she took care of her younger sister, Princess Yen. She gave almost everything she wanted. She had a sister complex and was considerate. Besides, he was Qiguan Rang's youngest son. Who would dare to neglect him in the palace? But, he felt a little strange, but he couldn't tell what was strange about it. On the other side, Qiguan Rang agreed to Princess Lien's request. Not only did Princess Lien take away the 1-month-old baby, but she also took away the baby's food, the wet nurse. After the banquet ended, Wei Ci said to him in private, the little Lang Jun will be fine in the palace. I'm not worried. Although Princess Lien is young, she does things in the style of His Majesty. Qiguan Rang wasn't worried. He was just worried about how to explain to his wife that Princess Lien had taken away his son's 1-month-old baby. Wei Ci was speechless. Quite in the style of His Majesty. Was he referring to the fact that he was obsessed with looks? Qiguan Rang said, You seem distracted today. Is there something difficult? Wei Ci shook his head. It's not difficult. It's just that the Wei family sent people over a few days ago. It wasn't easy to send them away, but it wasn't easy to reject them either. I've heard about it. But you don't have much of a relationship with the Wei family. Why are they looking for you? Wei Ci said. Its eldest brother's child. Ever since eldest brother passed away, the orphan and widowed mother have been living in poverty. Nye Yang and Nye Qing were defeated. Wei Tsong committed suicide under His Majesty's god-slaying saber. Although Wei Ci didn't have a knot in his heart, he couldn't really watch the orphan and widowed mother die. He could ignore the rest of the Wei family, but he couldn't. However, because of what happened in his previous life, Wei Ci had a knot in his heart with his nephews. If they hadn't secretly instigated and schemed against him, how would Wei Tsong have become estranged from him and committed such a heinous crime? However, these were from his previous life. No matter how much he hated them, he wouldn't blame them on his nephews who had done nothing. He just wanted to find someone to talk to about this matter. Wei Ci didn't want to bother His Majesty. His other good friends were busy. He accidentally revealed a worried look during the banquet, but Qiguan Rang saw through it. Just give them silver tails. After all, they can't be too intimate. Qiguan Rang said, it's hard to tell whether they're relying on you because they can't live on any more or because there's someone guiding them behind the scenes. If it's the former, no matter how you take care of them, it's fine. If it's the latter. Wei Ci really looked on coldly from the sidelines. He watched his nephew who had lost his father and his sister-in-law who was widowed live a difficult life. The imperial censor's memorials could immediately fill up His Majesty's desk. No matter what his true temperament was, at least the moral character he displayed in front of others should not be tainted. If Wei Ci even looked on coldly from the sidelines, how could he love the people of the world? However, it wasn't good to be too intimate. Others didn't know, but Qiguan Rang knew that Wei Ci's identity was very sensitive. It was fine to be a lone official. He only needed to be loyal to His Majesty. If he was involved in other conflicts of interest and power, Wei Ci would be in danger. Wei Ci said, that's what I plan to do. Giving them silver tails to improve their lives was enough. Wei Ci really didn't dare to touch more things. If you're really worried, you might as well talk to His Majesty. His Majesty's intentions can't be wrong. Qiguan Rang felt that communication was still very important. After all, no one could always use their eyes and brain waves to communicate. Wei Ci nodded. As they talked, he felt that he seemed to have forgotten something. What did he forget? He couldn't recall it for a while. Wei Ci was also busy with political affairs, so he quickly forgot about this little wave. Many years later, the 8-year-old Princess Lian officially chose her study partners. Wei Ci saw that among the study partners was Qiguan Rang's youngest son. Wei Ci was speechless. He inexplicably felt that this situation was somewhat familiar. This Qiguan, she is only 5 years old. How can he be your study partner? The clean brush spun nimbly between Her Highness's fingers. She played with the brush with one hand and supported her cheek with the other. He's good-looking. Pleasing to the eye appearance was the most important thing. Although the 4 study partners were all good-looking, Qiguan she was indeed the most good-looking of them all. He had inherited the bloodline of his father, Qiguan Rang, from the northern borderline. He had a high nose and deep eyes. He was handsome and had a slightly feminine appearance. However, he was still young. He was fair and plump. His red lips and white teeth were very likable. Wei Ci forced himself not to think too much, but he couldn't help but feel nervous. Grand Tutor, you don't like him? Wei Ci shook his head. Wenjing has taught him well. This child has such manners at such a young age. How can I not like him? Princess Lian said, then I will choose him. Wei Ci was speechless. Chapter 1846. Qiguan Rang. Qiguan Rang. Wake up. The call was like a distant bell, knocking on Qiguan Rang's heart, slowly waking him up from his long dream. He opened his tired eyes and saw the dazzling light outside the window and the tall green canopy of the trees. The professor is looking for you. His deskmate kicked Qiguan Rang. The latter held his head with a headache, his slightly gloomy eyes showing a bit of defenseless vulnerability. You've been listless these days. Did you go out to have fun? Nothing, I've been dreaming for the past few days and can't sleep well. His deskmate secretly touched up her makeup with lipstick. Her red lips were full and moist. Coupled with her face, she looked even more mature and charming. Another dream? Qiguan Rang looked out the window with his chin in his hand and said faintly, yes, but the scenes in the dream are very fragmented. I always suspect that it's my past life. His deskmate rolled his eyes. You've seen too much. I think it's your imagination that's caused by your sleep disorder. Qiguan Rang didn't answer. He just looked at the scorching sun outside the window without blinking. At this time, it was midsummer and the heat outside the window was surging. The air was almost distorted by the heat, but the room was still as cool as spring. Why is the professor looking for me? Qiguan Rang looked for a while and then remembered why his deskmate woke him up. His deskmate said, what else? It's probably because of the exemption quota for the Federation's top university. There are only 3 spots in the entire school and you've always been number 1. No matter what, there should be a spot for you. You're really amazing. You're preparing to make a great leap. Qiguan Rang didn't feel happy and just snorted coldly. There's no exemption. I can still get in based on my ability. He said it calmly without the slightest bit of deliberately showing off, but his deskmate knew that he wasn't showing off. If this was considered showing off, Qiguan Rang was probably on the road of showing off for the past 20 years. He had been number 1 in the Sea Planet's comprehensive exam for 20 consecutive years. He had received all kinds of big and small awards and was one of the best in the comprehensive exam. The Federation implemented 20 years of compulsory education, which was equivalent to elementary school, middle school, high school, and university in ancient times. 20 years of compulsory education were free. Students would get their graduation certificate and could find a good job if they had the ability. Of course, if someone wished to advance further and did not want to enter society at their current age, they could choose to participate in the federal exam at their own expense. Students who passed the comprehensive examination would be able to enter the Federation's most prestigious institutions of higher learning for further study. Higher education institutions had always been strict with those who entered and those who left. The elimination rate was more than 60%. Any student who successfully graduated from a higher education institution was an elite among the elites. His deskmate sighed. That's true, but it's still better to get a spot. Who can guarantee that nothing will go wrong on the day of the exam? Do not forget each other when you are rich and powerful. When you've made it big, I'll go to the central planet of the Federation and rely on you. I've never left Planet C in my life. I heard that the central planet is a flourishing planet with lush greenery all year round. It's not as barren as Planet C. Planet C was suitable for human habitation, but it was barren in resources. The outdoor temperature was above 40 degrees Celsius all year round. The planet's environment was not good, and its geographical location was not good either. It was a remote planet with a very backward economy and society. Although they could live a stable life here, the universe was so big. Who wouldn't want to go out and explore? Qiguan Rang grunted in agreement. His deskmate continued, if you really managed to stand out, that would be amazing. The solidification of the social class in the Federation was not too serious, but it was not easy to climb up from the bottom. Qiguan Rang said, don't read those useless news. The current Federation was not like the ancient Earth era. Other than higher education institutions, education resources were free for all citizens. Learning was not as good as the elite students. Rather than saying that resources were biased, it was better to say that one was too lazy and innately inferior. Boring. It's so tiring to talk to a gloomy guy like you. Qiguan Rang did not comment. He went to look for the professor. The professor's words made Qiguan Rang a little unhappy. The professor tried to persuade him to give up the recommended spot. The reason was that he was strong enough to stand out in the comprehensive exam. It was better to leave the precious spot for other students. This is also for the good of the school. Qiguan Rang said, but it's not friendly to me. He was confident that he could pass the comprehensive exam, but it did not mean that he deserved to lose the precious recommended spot. Just as his deskmate said, his current state was not stable. He often had headaches and nightmares. It was hard to guarantee that the comprehensive exam would not have any accidents. As for the professor's suggestion, I reject it. The professor's face was a little ugly. Student Qiguan, how can you face the alma mater that nurtured you like this? Qiguan Rang said, it was the federation that nurtured me and the federation that allocated the funds. The alma mater only played the role of a middleman. I also hope that the professor can understand that the recommended spot given by the federation is not a tool for private gain. If it belongs to me, it is mine. After a few days of rejection, Qiguan Rang happened to hear that the third-ranked student had given up the recommended spot and was replaced by another unfamiliar student. That student's results are not outstanding. It's just that his art results are a little better. I can't believe he got the recommended spot. Qiguan Rang coldly read his book. Where there's sunshine, there's also haze. This kind of person is a disgrace to the name of teaching and learning. His deskmate could not help but stiffen. I say, deskmate, have you realized that the way you speak has been a little strange recently? Qiguan Rang frowned. Have I? His deskmate said, yes. For example, when you were sleeping and I woke you up, the look in your eyes and the tone you used when you first woke up was scary. It was still the same face and the same voice, but the aura was completely different. It had the pressure of a superior. Qiguan Rang frowned. I don't know why, but that dream has been happening more frequently recently. This dream did not just appear in the past 1 or 2 years. It had started when Qiguan Rang could still remember. It was just that he was a little over 6 years old at that time. The dream was vague and he could not remember it clearly. The only thing he remembered was the emptiness in his heart after waking up, and occasionally a strong sense of regret. He felt that he was looking for someone. But he did not know who that person was. While all the candidates in the Federation were busy with the comprehensive exam, Qiguan Rang, who had obtained the recommended spot with excellent results, was very calm. Not only did he have the time to sleep and read, but he even took the time to go back to the largest retirement city on planet C to see his guardian. There were some things he wanted to talk to his guardian about. It was about his childhood memories. His guardian told him a shocking secret. In order to maintain the population, the Federation uses artificial methods to interfere with reproduction. You know this, right? Of course, Qiguan Rang knew. Since more than 1,000 years ago, almost every citizen of the Federation came out from artificial incubators, not from the mother's womb. The guardian sighed. Natural reproduction will give birth to children with genetic defects. Artificial methods can screen embryos with genetic problems, but there is no guarantee that there will be no problems after birth. According to the Federation law, children who mature and leave the artificial incubator have their own human rights. No one can forcibly take them away. You are one of those with acquired mental retardation. Your body has detected that your spiritual body is weaker than a paramecium. Qiguan Rang was speechless. Was he serious? The guardian also sighed. These children with problems are usually handed over to a specialized robot organization to take care of them until they die of natural causes. You are one of the unusual ones. When you were about 6 years old, you suddenly detected a strong spiritual fluctuation. You said your name was Qiguan Rang. Qiguan Rang choked out a sentence. But I don't have these memories, the guardian said. You were even sent to the research institute as a baby for a while. You don't have these memories either, this case was too special. The research institute did not have a biopsy, but it was inevitable to do a few more comprehensive examinations. If they could find the root cause, they might be able to solve the problem of those children with mental retardation raised by machines. The results of the research were fruitless. Qiguan Rang was an independent Federation citizen, so the research institute under the Federation's breeding agency arranged for him to be an ordinary citizen. Coincidentally, the Guardian was about to retire. He used his position for private gain to ask for Qiguan Rang's custody and moved to his hometown, Planet C, to retire. He was very attentive to Qiguan Rang's education. The latter's performance was more like a genius than a mentally retarded person with a defect in his mental genes. So many years had passed in a flash. Qiguan Rang was now 26 years old. He wanted to participate in the comprehensive examination and go to a broader stage. Sigh. Qiguan Rang was definitely a one-in-a-billion miracle. I'm preparing to go to the best university in the Federation. The Guardian said, you have ambition. The school's recommendation only allowed Qiguan Rang to enter the best university, but he did not know which university it was. He directly targeted the leader of the best university. He had ambition. However, the best university in the Federation is basically training military talents. Your conditions are not advantageous. The Guardian did not dare to be so arrogant when he was young. At the same time, he was also a little worried. The Federation has been fighting against foreign countries in recent years. Your path is not easy. Qiguan Rang said in a low voice, I don't know either, but I have to go there. The Guardian was speechless. It was strange that Qiguan Rang was not interested in other things, but he was very enthusiastic about military-related content. While they were talking, the Federation's military media pushed a piece of news. Qiguan Rang asked, who is she? The Guardian said, Jiang Pengji, the commander of the army. My goddess. If I can get the goddess's signature in this life, it will be worth it. Qiguan Rang was speechless. He looked seriously at the determined red-haired woman on the virtual screen. She looked strangely familiar. Why haven't I seen her before? The Guardian said, there's a war at the front lines. How can I have time to be on the news? The Federation had fewer large-scale wars in recent years, but there were still local wars. The 7th Army was the front line, so they could not be missed. Jiang Pengji, as the commander of the army, naturally could not stay in the back. The Federation's usual tactic was to report the good news and not the bad news. They comforted the citizens internally and took a tough stance against the outside world. The 7th Army was the front line, so it appeared on the news the least. But with the decrease of wars in the past 2 years, it slowly began to appear in the public's view. Qiguan Rang read the news over and over again for a long time. That night, the scene in his dream became a little clearer. He felt that he had vaguely grasped something, but after waking up, he felt a little lost. That feeling lasted until the day he entered the first school. He came to the first school in the Federation from the remote sea planet. He did not know if it was a coincidence or fate, but the student sitting next to him was a new student with the same fiery red hair. Jiang Yen. Qiguan Rang's heart trembled. Qiguan Rang. The latter also frowned, but did not say anything. The principal was giving a long and meaningless speech. When the students were drowsy, he suddenly dropped a bomb. Hearing the uproar and cheers around him, Qiguan Rang could not help but widen his eyes and look carefully at the person on the giant screen. The intense throbbing in his chest indicated that this scene was unusual. In a trance, a familiar scene seemed to appear in front of him. It was the strict and solemn prison of the military camp. He was in a sorry state talking to a woman. In this big world, no one can call themselves a wise ruler except for me. Apart from me, who else can you be loyal to? If you are a wise ruler, I am willing to serve you even if I have to go to hell. I will serve you forever. But are you? Of course I am. The woman looked at him, and he was almost burned by the flames in her eyes. He sneered. "Words are no proof," the woman said. "Indeed, words are no proof, but reality and the future will tell you the answer." Qiguan Rang did not know how he got out of the venue. A cold wind with the fragrance of flowers blew over, and he shivered violently. When he came back to his senses, he realized that he was out of the venue. In the distance, the red-haired new student of the same batch that he had met once was talking to the famous leader of the 7th Army. The two of them seemed to notice his gaze and could not help but turn around. The goddess, who was also his guardian, walked towards him. She walked without making a sound, but Qiguan Rang felt that something was about to rush out from the depths of his mind. 2 meters away from him. Wenzheng. Qiguan Rang felt something in front of him, and memories of the past surged out like a tide. Yes. Please remember the original domain name of this book. Jiutian Shenhuang Mobile Version Website. Chapter 1847. Feng Ju, the third son of the Feng family in Shangyang. He had lived a carefree and noble life since he was a child. He could be said to be the chosen one born with a golden spoon in his mouth. According to the theory of a famous psychologist, there were 5 kinds of human needs from low to high. Physiological needs, safety needs, social needs, respect needs, and self-realization needs. As the youngest legitimate son of the first noble family in Dongqing, Feng Ju was doted on by his elders since he was a child. They gave him whatever he wanted, so he naturally had no shortage of the needs of the lower class. The psychologist once said that when the needs of a certain level were met, one would naturally begin to desire the next level. Feng Ju was naturally the same. He was born with something that others could not have. The remaining meaning of life was to pursue himself. In layman's terms, he was a teenager who thought about challenging the impossible all day long to make further progress in his life. Of course, his heart was lonely. Because vulgar people could not understand his pursuit and ambition. Just when the world was in chaos, Feng Ju refused the letter sent by his eldest brother and second brother asking him to go home and stay there. He had to go out and find a wise master. Regardless of the feelings of his 2 brothers, Feng Ju's servant was a little broken down and wanted to cry. Tears fell down his face. Feng Ju's face was covered with dirt and he scolded him angrily. "Why are you crying? You're so annoying. Shut up." The servant cried even harder. His voice was hoarse, and his tears turned from one to a torrential downpour. He was very sad. He was not crying about how his Lang Jun loved to court death. He was grieving that he was going to die at such a young age. Yes, he was going to die at such a young age. When they were crossing the mountains, they were caught by a nest of bandits. They were now in the woodshed of the bandits' lair. The little servant felt that there was no hope of escape. Naturally, he wanted to cry to his heart's content. The bandits who caught them were all fiercer than the other. In short, the little servant was very scared. On the contrary, Feng Ju was very calm. "What's the use of crying?" The servant sobbed. "Third Lang Jun, this place is so remote. If something happens, I'm afraid your family won't know." Feng Ju said, "I didn't even cry. Do you think my life is less important than yours?" At this time, Feng Ju was young and full of vigor. He had the arrogance of a young man from an aristocratic family. The servant was speechless, but he did not dare to disobey. There was no other reason. If it weren't for the attendant dragging them down, Feng Ju wouldn't have been caught. The errand boy was frightened by the bandits who jumped out and kept clinging to Feng Ju, making it impossible for him to pull out his sword and causing Feng Ju to be captured by the bandits. In short, the errand boy was very timid now. He was afraid that he would be killed by the angry Feng Ju before he died in the hands of the bandits. I'm sorry, Lang Jun. I didn't mean to burden you." Feng Ju's mind was also in a mess at this time, and the boy servant was making all kinds of noise in his ear. He really couldn't help but go down. The errand boy muttered insensibly. Actually, if San Langjun hadn't run away from home, Feng Ju said angrily, shut up. Did he run away from home? He was fumbling ahead for his ideals and life. Mediocre people did not understand his pursuit and ambition at all. After the master and servant had hurt each other for a while, the door of the woodshed that had been closed for a long time finally opened. A few tall and burly figures stood at the door against the light. Feng Ju's heart tightened, but he also knew that this was not the time to panic. The bandits did not kill them on the spot or interrogate them, mostly because the master and servant still had some value. The negotiation would most likely affect the lives of the two of them. In any case, saving their lives was the most important. They could not let these bandits think that the master and servant were fat sheep that could be easily slaughtered. When the time came, they would kill the hostages of the Feng family. After all, no one could escape unscathed after offending the Feng family. It was better to kill the hostages and end all troubles once and for all. However, they could not let the bandits think that the two of them had no value at all. For the bandits, the worthless captives were too old and sour even if they were chopped up and fed to pigs. Only when the value was not high or low, and they found the right position, could they survive safely. If it really did not work, Feng Ju could still hide his identity and feign civility with the bandits. After gaining their trust, he could plan a later plan and contact the Feng family. Where are you taking me and Langjun? The errand boy shrank his head in fear like a quail, but he still plucked up the courage to ask the bandits why they were here. The bandits snorted coldly, picked up the collar of the boy servant, and dragged him away. One of the bandits asked Feng Ju with his eyes. Feng Ju's expression froze, and he waved his hand. No, I have my own legs. Third Lang of the Feng family would definitely not embarrass the Feng family. Feng Ju went to see the bandit leader with this idea. Where was the bandit leader? Feng Ju stood in the huge hall. The main seat was draped with a neat tiger skin, and the woman who sat in the indifferent posture was sitting there. The woman's expression was cold and unruly, and there was a cute big cat spot lying on her lap that everyone wanted to hug, kiss, and scratch. It was obviously a tiger. The tiger, the king of all beasts, was lying on the woman's lap like a cat, and from time to time, it let out comfortable and coquettish snores. There was no doubt that the bandit leader Feng Ju wanted to see was none other than this woman. What's your name? The woman was too lazy to lift her eyelids, and her slender fingers moved through the tiger's fur. Feng Ju thought of something and bowed respectfully. I'm Feng San. Feng San. The woman smiled lazily. She rubbed her bare feet on the tiger's belly, and the obedient tiger rubbed its big furry face on her knee. This scene was really harmonious and beautiful. What the hell? Feng Ju did not think that this tiger was kind and cute. There was still raw meat hanging from the corner of its mouth. Are you really called Feng San? What kind of parents would give their son such a name? Feng Ju lied through his teeth, my family is poor. Although my parents want to support my third son to study, their ability is limited after all. Third son? You have an elder brother besides you in your family? Feng Ju said, yes, the eldest brother is Feng De, the second brother is Feng Er, and I'm the third. Naturally, I'm Feng San. When he lowered his head, he did not notice a hint of a smile flashing across the woman's eyes. That smile was not a kind smile, but a blatant mockery. It was true that Feng Ju's acting skills were passable, but the boy servant beside him was not. Did he not see that the boy servant's expression was full of flaws? Feng Ju was lying. However, the name Feng San was simple and crude. It was probably similar to the pronunciation of the family's San Langjun, right? The woman did not pursue the matter, and only said, your family is poor? Then I can't let you live. Drag him down and chop him up to feed him. That way, we can save some meat. Chop him up to feed who? Just look at the excited look on the tiger's face as it crouched beside the woman. The boy servant was so scared that he fainted. Feng Zhu did not look too good either. He tried his best to fight for the possibility of survival. For example, although his family was poor, he was good at reading and was knowledgeable. Unfortunately, he was born into a poor family, so he could not enter the officialdom to seek an official career. So if the woman let him live, he was willing to be the woman's inept advisor and help her manage the bandit stronghold. It was also a way out. The woman sneered, "Do you want to be a bandit like me?" Feng Zhu said, "There are 360 professions, and every profession is worth a try." So what if he was a bandit? Couldn't bandits have the ambition to improve themselves and work hard to expand their career? Professional discrimination was unacceptable. Feng Zhu spoke with fervor and assurance again. The surrounding bandits who were listening were tempted, but the woman had the final say in the bandit stronghold. If she refused to agree, no matter how much the bandits valued Feng Zhu's talent, Feng Zhu could only be chopped up and fed to the tiger. After a while, the woman nodded and said, "He's a little interesting. Keep him." "Is the boy servant next to you?" Feng Zhu said, "Yes. My family is poor, but it's still possible to buy a cheap boy servant." The woman said, "Throw him into the backyard to clean and wash clothes. We're in need of a handyman." Thus, Feng Zhu successfully transformed into Feng San and became the inept advisor of the bandit stronghold. He slowly gained the trust of the woman, Jiang Pengji. Only then did he know that the seemingly ordinary stronghold actually had a wide range of businesses. Not only did they have a part-time job of robbing people, but they also worked as bodyguards to escort people. What if no one hired them? They could rob people and see if the merchants they stopped wanted to be robbed or if they wanted to hire them as bodyguards. Feng Zhu was dumbfounded by the bandits' actions. "Isn't it not good to do this?" The woman rolled her eyes. "We are bandits. When have bandits ever been reasonable?" Bandits were unreasonable, especially the bandit leader, Jiang Pengji. Not only did she dare to rob rich people, but she also dared to rob the officials of Dongqing's government. She was simply lawless. Feng Zhu complained in his heart, but in fact, he was taking the side of the evildoer. After a few months, Feng Zhu was gradually brainwashed by the woman. He surprisingly agreed with all kinds of words she said. Every night, he told himself to calm down, but during the day, he followed the bandit leader everywhere to challenge and annex the surrounding bandit strongholds. For the sustainable development of the bandit stronghold, Feng Zhu also worked day and night. As a genius advisor, Feng Zhu was also keenly aware of the suspicious aspects of the bandit stronghold. The seemingly unreasonable bandit leader seemed to be secretly planning something. There was nothing to study about the other bandits, but the bandit leader was very suspicious. In order to solve this mystery, Feng Zhu had several opportunities to leave the bandit stronghold, but he didn't. He continued to stay. One day, Feng Zhu made great contributions in annexing the bandit stronghold. He arranged all kinds of personnel very well. The bandit stronghold held a celebration banquet. As the inept advisor, Feng Zhu was also surrounded by the crowd and drank a lot of wine. As he drank, he got drunk. When Feng Zhu was young, he didn't have a good alcohol tolerance. When he drank too much, his eyes were watery. His behavior was very different from usual. He was drunk and couldn't hold back the words in his heart. He boldly asked the doubts in his heart, but he found out Jiang Pengji's big plan. "I want to overturn this world." The bandit leader, who was also drunk, climbed onto the roof. He held a wine pot in one hand and pointed at the full moon in the sky with the other. "I want the sun and the moon to turn upside down. I want all living beings to surrender to me." Feng Zhu crouched under the ladder with the wine pot in his arms and clapped for her. "Great ambition, first master." Jiang Pengji asked him drunkenly, "What do you want to do?" Feng Zhu said drunkenly, "My ambition isn't as great as yours. He was really drunk, but the first master seemed to be drunk, but in fact, his eyes were clear and bright. Occasionally, there was a sly glint in his eyes. Feng Ju roared at the moon, "I want to achieve what the predecessors couldn't do." There was no obstacle in the world that Feng Ju couldn't overcome. What was so interesting about making use of the Feng family's background to dominate the court? Dongqing, the court, the corrupt officials. Which one of them was worthy of him? Was the emperor of Dongqing worthy of him bowing down to him? When he thought of his eldest brother and second brother following the path arranged by their families and living according to the prescribed order, he felt extremely uncomfortable. It wasn't because he felt uncomfortable, but because his two brothers couldn't live according to their wishes. You want to overturn the world, overturn the sun and the moon, and make all living beings surrender to you. I'll help you do these impossible things. This time, it was Jiang Pengji's turn to clap for him with the wine pot in her arms. Great ambition, military advisor Feng San. Feng Ju's cheeks were red from the drunkenness. He swayed left and right with weak footsteps. He waved his hand and said, "Well said. It's a small matter. It's not worth bragging about." The moon that night was bright and clean. It was cold, but it didn't make one feel cold. Instead, it was very comfortable. It was also from that night onwards that Feng Ju and the bandit leader had a strange tacit understanding that outsiders couldn't explain. Drinking, having fun, and stirring up trouble were things that Feng Ju couldn't or didn't dare to do in his life 10 or 20 years ago. Feng Ju had done them all happily even though he was the third son of the Feng family. He thought that meeting Jiang Pengji was the best accident in life. But as time went by, the world changed. His identity changed from Feng San, Feng Ju, military advisor Feng, to official Feng. It seemed that he had gained a lot, but in fact, he had lost more things when his identity changed. Some of these things were given up willingly, and some were lost because he was forced to do so. Many years later, the female bandit leader became the ruler of the world. When she drunkenly called him Feng San, Feng Ju also responded with a drunken smile. It seemed to be intimate, but it was actually alienating. Or rather, they both knew that the other party wasn't drunk. They were just pretending to be drunk. They used to talk about everything, but now they were distant and indifferent. Feng Ju had his own difficulties. He became the person she once hated the most and walked the path that was completely opposite to her expectations. The dream was long and meaningful. Feng Ju lay on the bed and couldn't help but smile. Sometimes he frowned and felt sad. Until the sound of the bell rang faintly in his ears and woke him up from the dream. "Why, is it so noisy outside?" Feng Ju opened his eyes. He, who had a gray beard and hair, had suffered a serious illness recently. His condition had only improved in the past few days. That was why he was dreaming about the interesting events of his youth. The bell outside had yet to stop. Feng Ju felt that it was very noisy. At this time, the filial son and grandson who were guarding outside said in a trembling voice, "The Emperor of Daxing." Feng Ju felt that something was wrong. "Who?" The eldest son said with a pale face, "The Emperor of Daxing passed away half an hour ago." Feng Ju sat on the bed. The string of beads in his hands scattered all over the ground. The person who had been companions for nearly 40 years, left just like that? They met insignificant people and got to know each other by chance. Although it was absurd, it was still an interesting conversation between the ruler and the minister. The only flaw in this interesting conversation was that the ending was not what they were happy to see. The relationship between the ruler and the minister did not last to the end. Instead, it was alienation and indifference. "Father, please, restrain your grief." Feng Ju was silent for a long time. From the first glimmer of dawn to the approaching dusk, he finally snapped out of his trance. His body stiffly picked up the scattered beads on the ground. "Come, change your clothes and enter the palace to see the former emperor." The former emperor had passed away. Even if the minister was too sick to get up, he still had to crawl over. Feng Ju didn't know that the new emperor who had ascended the throne after being suppressed by the aristocrats still had some affection for the Feng family. But he couldn't take the initiative to give them something to use against him. After all, the former emperor and the former emperor's daughter were different. In the future, I'll have to make a living in the hands of your daughter. Chapter 1848. Feng Ju's most treasured xiangfei bamboo was planted in the courtyard. Every time the breeze blew, the bamboo leaves rustled. Rockery, flowing water, flowers, dense bamboo, it was a quiet and elegant scene. I'm afraid you, Feng Huijia, are the only one who knows how to enjoy life in the Feng family. This is the wine you brewed yourself. The taste is indeed unique. The woman in a pine green dress casually leaned against the rockery by the pond. One of her feet was fiddling with the gravel, and the other was on the water surface. She reeked of alcohol, and her cheeks were flushed. Her right hand held a red rope, and the other end of the red rope was an empty jar of wine. Even drinking wine can't shut your mouth. You climbed over the wall and sneaked into the wine cellar. Not only did you drink for free, but you also complain that I'm idle. You're really hard to please. Feng Ju was also sitting not far away. He leaned against the table and held a jar of wine in his arms. With a look of disdain, he said, "Remember to pay for the wine." The woman in the pine green dress revealed a drunken smile. She held her forehead with her hand and tucked her fingers between her fingers. Her long hair that was scattered on her forehead was pushed to the back of her head. She said lazily, "Although it's just a few jars of wine, it shouldn't be expensive. But I'm so poor that I can't afford to pay for the wine." Feng Ju was speechless. This was the first time he had seen someone drink wine so confidently and boldly. If it wasn't for the special status of the woman in the pine green dress, Feng Ju really wanted to call the servants over to beat her up and send her to the government. Smiley face angle, however, the government was run by her. His two brothers more or less earned a living under her, so Feng Ju could only tolerate it. Speaking of which, how did you think of learning how to brew wine? The woman in the pine green dress was also the ruler of this world, Jiangpengji. Her misty eyes were still clear. She asked curiously. She didn't quite understand why Feng Ju refused to become an official. Instead, he became more and more playful. Feng Jin complained to Jiangpengji more than once that the naughty child's younger brother was troublesome. Feng Ju was a well-known eccentric scholar. He was uninhibited, loved freedom, and courted death. She didn't see him write poems. Instead, he was interested in eating, drinking, and having fun all day. A year ago, for the sake of a jar of fine wine presented by a small country outside the region, Feng Ju had purposely packed his wallet and left home with his servants. When Feng Jin talked about this, his expression was complicated. Well, her brother was in his 40s and he still ran away from home. She really didn't know what to say. A few days ago, Feng Jin gave her a jar of wine brewed by Feng Ju. Although it wasn't strong, it was mellow and intoxicating. Jiangpengji felt that one jar was not enough, so she climbed over the low wall of Feng Ju's house and stole his wine cellar. As the emperor, Jiangpengji probably had more drinking buddies than confidants smiley face angle Jiangpengji had a high alcohol tolerance and visited the wine cellar many times. Feng Ju was naturally alarmed and specially came to catch the thief. The two of them bumped into each other, so they drank together. No matter how imaginative Feng Ju was, no matter how reckless he never thought that the ruler of a country would steal someone else's wine cellar. I should be glad that this fellow is a woman and not a man. Otherwise, it would be so easy to sneak into a minister's backyard. Feng Ju couldn't help but complain. Jiangpengji rocked back and forth with laughter. Her beautiful eyes were filled with a sly smile. You make it sound like there won't be a commotion in the minister's backyard because I'm a woman. Feng Ju was speechless. Who gave her the courage to say that she wanted to be a minister in green so blatantly? Feng Ju said harshly, no wonder I noticed that the green clouds in the sky above the capital were thicker when I came back. Jiang Pengji supported her forehead with one hand and said with a smile, this also applies to your residence. Your wife is very interesting. Feng Ju, who had run away from home for a year, was speechless. He knew that Jiang Pengji's words were nonsense, but Feng Ju still couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. When he was angry, he took a sip of wine to drown his sorrows. Your wife is an ambitious woman. It's a pity that she's confined to the backyard. You've been away for a whole year. She's so bored that she wants to plant weeds in the backyard. She might as well use her connections to find a leisurely place. As her husband, don't you feel a little pressured? Feng Ju was speechless when he heard that. After thinking about it for a while, he understood that Jiang Pengji's purpose for coming today was not just to steal the wine cellar. There are so many people in this world who are willing to share your Majesty's worries and burdens. What's so interesting about becoming one of them? Feng Ju said, what I've been pursuing all my life is to be different from the rest of the world. I want to do things that the rest of the world can't do. The Feng family had a second brother in the imperial court, and the eldest brother was in charge of the Feng family. I only need to enjoy myself while I can, so that I won't waste this lifetime of time. Why bother to tire yourself out? At first, Feng Ju thought that he would become an official after the Jiang dynasty was established. However, when he witnessed Jiang Pengji's ascension, Feng Ju felt that the blockage in his heart had finally been lifted. It was as if the knot in his heart for many years had finally been cured. He was the third son of the Feng family. He was born into a prestigious family and enjoyed all kinds of love. He had no ambition for fame and fortune, only the heart to pursue himself. If he asked himself honestly, did Feng Ju want a position that was second only to one and above all? Or was it the right to rule over the entire court? Perhaps because he had been born in the Feng family since he was a child, fame and fortune were as common as breathing to him, as natural as the air. He seemed to be standing at the crossroads of his life, hesitating about the rest of his life. Should he work hard for the family like his eldest brother, or should he attack the imperial court like his second brother and become a superior person? It was the first time that the confused Feng Ju had asked for someone's opinion on such a matter. Of course, he couldn't let outsiders know about such a shameful question. He could only confide in his wife. He was very lucky to marry a good wife. She didn't ask him to fight for power with his eldest brother, nor did she force him to follow his second brother's ups and downs in the officialdom. His wife only said, Lang Jun, you have pinned your ambition on Meng, What's wrong with living for yourself for once? The Meng, that his wife mentioned was a student that Feng Ju had personally taught. He poured his heart and soul into her, even more so than his own biological daughter. Huang Meng, Huang Song's daughter. Feng Ju didn't neglect the education of his children, but his wife couldn't not see the subtle favoritism. She saw it and chose to understand it. Feng Ju was grateful from the bottom of his heart. When his wife supported Feng Ju in his pursuit of self-satisfaction and spiritual satisfaction, Feng Ju completely let go of himself and did things as he pleased. He didn't do anything in the officialdom, but he became a big shot among the big shots in the circle of celebrities. He was an idol-level figure, the kind of person who would throw fruit in a cart when he went out. His eldest and second brothers were angry at first, but as time passed, they let him be. To appease his two brothers' anger, Feng Ju simply sent his son and daughter to them. He said bluntly that he had no opinion on whichever one his brothers wanted to groom into the family or the imperial court. Feng Jin, Feng Gui, Feng Ju was also a weirdo who pushed his children to be in the limelight. He never expected that such a weirdo would become Jiang Pengji's drinking buddies. Not only did they drink and chat about the future, but they also helped Jiang Pengji analyze the current situation. Feng Zhu wasn't a member of the imperial court, but his sensitivity to the political situation was something that even Feng Jin couldn't compare to. It's just that a bystander has a clearer view of things. After all, second brother is still involved in the situation. Regarding this, Feng Zhu modestly expressed that he was inferior to his second brother. Compared to the political affairs of the imperial court, he hoped to experience more interesting things that he had never experienced before. Every time Jiang Pengji heard him say this, she couldn't help but roll her eyes. If Huayu and the rest heard this, they'd probably go crazy with anger. From their point of view, Feng Zhu was currently losing his ambition and wasting his talents. Feng Zhu said, "What's there to be angry about? They're already in their 40s. What if something bad happens to them?" Jiang Pengji said, "You know that they're old, yet you still don't restrain yourself." Feng Zhu rested his chin on his hand and sighed. In one's life, it's not easy to have a chance to live for oneself and to live the way one wants to live. Jiang Pengji smiled as she drank. "You've left for half your life, yet you're still young when you return. Your Majesty's words sound interesting." "That's exactly what you're saying." Feng Zhu burped and said drunkenly, "I really have to thank my two brothers for helping me bear the burden for being able to be willful and reckless in this life. They can't be willful, so I'll help them live that free and easy life." Jiang Pengji sneered. "Your words are getting more and more shameless. Do they still have to thank you?" Feng Zhu blinked and said, "Even if my brothers came to thank me, how would I dare to accept it?" Jiang Pengji was speechless. All right, he was indeed thick-skinned. He was very much to her liking. She didn't like to deal with old-fashioned people who were too serious. On the contrary, she admired those who were so unconventional and could play with them. Feng Zhu talked about the scenery outside the region, the desert oasis, and the beasts in the dense forest. Jiang Pengji listened very seriously. These scenes should be common to her, but after she came to this world, she was trapped in a small place. The scenery that Feng Zhu spoke of was distant as if it was from her previous life. Oh, no, it was her previous life. Jiang Pengji sneered and said, "You're making my heart itch with these words. If I were to be urged by you to abandon the court and run away from home impulsively, without a care for anything else," Feng Zhu smiled and said, "in that case, I'll become a sinner for all eternity. I'll really be recorded in history." Jiang Pengji stopped smiling and twirled the red string with her fingers. "It's a good suggestion, but, wait a little longer. When Lian is 18 or 20, I'll let her travel the world. Remember to lead the way then." It seemed like a joke, but her eyes were full of seriousness. "Huijia, you have to travel more, lest there's no one to introduce you to in the future." Feng Zhu also said seriously, "Your Majesty is in the prime of your life. It's still too early to talk about abdicating." Jiang Pengji shook her head. "It's not early. The first half of my life, or rather, most of it, will be left to others. The remaining few years will naturally be left to the person in my heart." Feng Zhu said nothing. "Are you really not going to enter the court?" Feng Zhu shook his head. Jiang Pengji said, "It's good that you don't. Some things are tainted with power and interests. It's too easy to change its taste. For example, your wine tastes just right. Brew more wine. It's delicious. Maybe in the future, the history books will record a few words and people of the future will use your name to name this wine." Feng Zhu sneered and said, "What wine? Feng Sanjiu? What a vulgar name." Jiang Pengji never walked through the front door. Even though she secretly drank so much that she reeked of alcohol, she still insisted on climbing over the wall. "How old are you? You think you're still young." No matter which wall Jiang Pengji climbed over, it seemed that Wei Ci would always be standing outside. She sometimes wondered if he was a spirit at the base of the wall. "I'm very happy today." Wei Ci supported her. The two hugged each other and leaned against the wall. What's there to be happy about, Your Majesty? Based on my age, in another 8 or 9 years, Lian will be able to hold her own. This burden can finally be relieved. How can I not be happy? It's still a long time. Jiang Pengji jumped onto his back. Wei Ci suddenly let out a cry of surprise. She muttered, "Sigh, it's indeed still a long time. When Lian steps down, you'll be almost 60. Wei Ci laughed and said, "I'll be old." Do you still like it, Your Majesty? Even when I'm old, I'll still be the most beautiful and handsome among old men. The people outside the wall teased, while the people inside the wall poured wine to the moon. First, set a small goal. For example, remember in 1 second, Booksellers Mobile. Chapter 1849. Su Ku, courtesy name Xiaoyu, was from Zisong County. He was born in a poor family and was fortunate enough to meet his master, which gave him the opportunity to learn. Before he encountered the great change at the age of 17, he had imagined his future countless times and was filled with enthusiasm. Although he lived a poor life, he still found joy in it. His poor body did not make him poor in spirit. His master was slightly worried about Su Ku's optimism. The more virtuous a person was, once he encountered a setback, he would either be more stubborn or completely destroyed and fall into the abyss. The Dongqing court respected the gentry, and the living space left for the poor was not rich, not to mention that Su Ku's family was not even comparable to an ordinary poor family. With such a proud character, he was really worried that Su Ku would not be able to take it if he encountered continuous setbacks in reality. His master had a vague premonition, but he did not tell Su Ku directly. He only wanted to wait for him to grow older and have a good talk with him. He never expected that Su Ku would be in prison because of a wrong decision. Caught and thrown into prison? How did this happen? Su Ku's master was awakened by his servant. He was so shocked that he forgot to speak. How could Xiaoyu kill someone? Quick, help me change my clothes and bring me to the county chief. Su Ku's master was a famous scholar in the local area. He opened a private school and among his students, Su Ku was the one he liked the most. Although he was born in a poor family, he was very perceptive, careful and patient. He also had a photographic memory, so it was very easy to teach him. He even planned to recommend Su Ku to find a friend in Shangjing when he was 20 years old and help Su Ku have a future. How did he become a murderer? The county chief of Zisong County revealed a little inside information for the sake of the famous scholar. It turned out that Su Ku's mother had offended a noble when she went to the market to buy vegetables. She was pushed to the ground by the noble's servant and died. Su Ku had just returned home from school and heard the news. He was very sad and angry. He took a knife and went to seek revenge. In the end, he killed the noble's servant. He was outnumbered, and in the end, he was caught, beaten up, and thrown into prison. The county chief sighed, "I know he is your favorite disciple, so I sent someone to take good care of him. He won't suffer too much in prison." His master's mind went blank. After a long while, he said, "You should avenge your mother." "What did you do wrong, Xiaoyu?" The county governor could not help but roll his eyes and say, "If killing is used to stop the killing after one's family is killed, what kind of law is there in this world?" His teacher said angrily. "Law? If Xiaoyu's mother was killed, would the nobleman and his henchmen suffer retribution? Punished by the law?" The laws of Dongqing sounded nice, but when it came to actual implementation, they were bullsh*t. On the surface, the landowning households would be severely punished for accidentally killing poor or commoners, but in reality, they would only be fined some money. The gentry could use money to buy a person's life, but it was different for the commoners and commoners. Their crime of assaulting a landowning household was even more severe than the normal punishment. Even if Su Ku had killed a lowly servant, the noble from the aristocratic family would still make Su Ku pay with his life. The county governor said, what's the point of telling me all this? Your student is too hot-tempered. To put it nicely, he would rather die in glory than live in dishonor. To put it bluntly, he has no schemes at all. He is jade, and that servant is not even worthy of being called a tile. It was only because they were familiar with each other that the county governor told Su Ke these things. Otherwise, he would have chased Su Ke out of anger. After a long while, his teacher asked, "Is Xiaoyu's life in danger?" The county governor said, "That family wanted Su Xiaoyu dead, but if you do something about it, he will probably be exiled." His teacher had been busy making arrangements for Su Ke, but in the end, he was still banished to a lowly servant and was branded as a punishment for 30 years. Although the county governor took care of him, Su Ke, who was taken out of prison, was still extremely skinny. I will never forget the kindness of teaching and saving my life. It is a long journey, and my unfilial disciple will not be able to serve me. Please take care of yourself, teacher. Dressed in prison clothes, Su Ke's face was no longer as relaxed and cheerful as it was a few months ago. His brows were full of darkness, and his eyes were cold. His teacher sent Su Ke off. In the end, he sighed and handed the prepared luggage to Su Ke. I have arranged everything. You, take good care of yourself. Su Ke took it, but he was not very optimistic. If his teacher could help him, that family could also send someone to do the same to Su Ke secretly. He was in a mess, and wearing broken straw sandals, he was forced to embark on the road of exile. Just as Su Ke had expected, he was sold to a broker house as soon as he left Zisong County. He was sold with a straw tag. If I can rise to the top one day, those who bully me, humiliate me, and hate me should all die. The pain of losing his mother and the disaster of being imprisoned made him grow rapidly in a short period of a year. Even though the tattoo on his face had festered and he had a high fever for several days in the hot summer, he stubbornly survived. His mother had passed away, but his aunt was still alive. How could he die so easily and make his enemies happy? After being sold, Su Ke became a vegetable washing worker in the backyard of an aristocratic family. Under his careful planning, Su Ke, who was diligent and intelligent, successfully caught the eye of the kitchen supervisor. In addition, he was literate. Step by step, he became the confidant of the young supervisor in the accounting room. In the spring of the second year, the turning point finally came. Su Ke, as the dowry of the noble lady of the aristocratic family, entered another family. This family was also one of the aristocratic families in Dongqing. The marriage between the two families was a strong alliance. Su Ke relied on his own ability to climb a little further. He kicked away the young supervisor and successfully caught the eye of the male master. Don't misunderstand. It was not because of his appearance that the male master was interested in, but because Su Ke discovered the hidden ambition under his elegant appearance. Even though the man was not a good person, he was grateful to him for recognizing his worth and saving him from a dangerous situation. With his help, Su Ke got rid of his lowly status and brought over his widowed aunt from Zisong County. To these people, it was just a small effort, but to Su Ke, it was a reversal of fate and a turning point. After that, Dongqing was in chaos. The male master that Su Ke worked for took advantage of the situation and became one of the famous feudal lords in the chaotic world. Su Ke also took advantage of the situation to take revenge. He let the soldiers rush into the aristocratic family in Zisong County. Before exterminating the whole family, he let them taste the greatest humiliation before they died. The situation in the chaotic world was ever-changing. One day, they might be dancing and singing, but the next day, they might be beheaded and hung for humiliation. Su Ke, who had become a prisoner, looked at the hanging corpse of his old master. His dark eyes were calm, and he surrendered to the new master without saying a word. There were also colleagues who would rather die than surrender. They cursed Su Ke for forgetting his morals at the sight of profit, completely forgetting who raised him. The previous master must have been blind to trust such a traitorous ingrate like you. Su Ke had a rebellious streak in his brain. His straightforward action of defecting to the new master seemed to prove this point. A traitorous villain was not to be trusted. Su Ke said coldly, "It's useless to say more." Another 2 years later, Su Ke relied on his outstanding ability to gain the trust of the new master, Jiang Pengji. She entrusted him with important tasks. Su Ke did not let down Jiang Pengji's trust in him. He took care of everything properly. "Su Xiaoyu, I advise you." One day after the celebration banquet, Su Ke met Feng Ju, who reeked of alcohol. When they passed each other, he heard the latter muttering. "What do you mean?" Su Ke stopped in his tracks and looked at Feng Ju calmly. "If Xiaoyu has done anything wrong, please don't hesitate to enlighten me." At that moment, when the night wind blew, Feng Ju shivered and sobered up a little. "No, nothing." Feng Ju acted like he was in pain. He waved his hands and left. Su Ke's heart sank slightly, but he did not give up his plan because of this. In order to avenge the previous master, he had been planning for a long time. He absolutely could not give up halfway at this time. Su Ke admitted that Jiang Pengji was much better as a lord than the previous master, but so what? The person who saved him from the swamp was the previous master. That day, Su Ke promised the heavens that he would remain loyal for the rest of his life. For him, there was no right or wrong in this matter. There was only the difference between what should be done and what should not be done. Su Ke made use of Jiang Pengji's trust in him to tamper with the military reports and misrepresent the military situation. Not only did he secretly collude with the ambitious surrendered generals to rebel, but he also lured Jiang Pengji to lead her troops deep into the enemy's encirclement. He also took advantage of the situation to cut off Jiang Pengji's supply of military rations and any escape route. When Jiang Pengji's confidants realized that something was wrong, the best time to rescue them had long passed. Qiguan Rang waved his feather fan and said calmly, "She treats you well." Su Ke used all the spies he had plotted for years. He did not intend to leave a way out for himself. When he was captured by Qiguan Rang and his men, he was prepared to die. However, before he died, there was still Jiang Pengji on the road to hell. He did not lose out. So what if she treats me well? I'd rather use these treats in exchange for my lord's life and the safety of my family. Su Ke said, "Besides, TSK, if it weren't for your stupidity, your bravery, and your arrogance, you wouldn't have taken so long to realize that something was wrong." After a day and a night, Livor Mortis appeared. Su Ke still remembered the death of his old lord. Jiang Pengji was ruthless. His old lord was hung on the city wall as a warning to the public. His family members, old and young, also fled. None of them survived. Qiguan Rang said, "Why are you so stubborn? The lord you mentioned wasn't a wise lord. It doesn't matter if he died earlier or later. It's just a different time. Even if he didn't die in the hands of the Lord, he would die in the hands of others. You're smart, how could you not see through it? But he was personally killed by Jiang Pengji. The hypothesis you mentioned doesn't exist." Su Ke sneered. "It doesn't matter if Jiang Pengji is a wise lord or if my lord is only ambitious but not capable. What does that have to do with me? I've never cared about the lives and deaths of the people in this world. You have a noble aspiration to save the common people and end the chaotic world, but I, Su Ke, am just a villain through and through. I don't see justice in black and white." He was tired of the so-called law. The world was chaotic and messy. If Jiang Pengji was changed, she would just be repeating the old path of the predecessors. Would she bring justice to the people? Could she make the law treat everyone equally? Don't joke with me. From the beginning to the end, Su Ke only wanted this person's life to avenge the death of his old lord. There was no other nonsense to say. Qiguan Rang sighed. "If that's the case, there's nothing else to say. Su Xiaoyu, have a safe journey." Consider it a token of my gratitude for working with you for the past 2 years. For the sake of these sentiments, he would let Su Ke die with dignity. Su Ke felt that something was wrong. Jiang Pengji was killed. Why are you indifferent? Qiguan Rang said, my lord has clear eyes and a clear heart. She's the best at seeing through people's hearts. How could she not see whether you're sincere or not? Su Ke's heart sank. She didn't fall for it. Qiguan Rang said, she fell for it. She did it on purpose. She just beat her at her own game. At most, she was in a sorry state. Her heart was hurt a little. Qiguan Rang believed that at some point, his lord really trusted Su Ke. She even gave him a chance. If Su Ke gave up on the plan, this matter would be over. Unfortunately, Su Ke didn't. It gave Jiang Pengji a chance to clean up the disloyal people in her camp. Cleaning up a group of people would be considered as getting rid of the weeds and keeping the gold. Su Ke sneered. There are 7,000 enemy troops in ambush. She has no chance of survival. Jin Qichuan, whom he had carefully chosen, would be her burial ground. At that moment, a low sound of armor clashing came from outside the tent. There were familiar footsteps and a familiar cold voice. Xiaoyu, I'm really disappointed. Not only did I survive, but I'm also unscathed. The tent was lifted and a person covered in blood came in. The straw sandals under her feet had sucked a lot of blood. Every footprint was stained with blood. Su Ke looked at her without saying a word. Qiguan Rang bowed and retreated to the side. With a swoosh, a long sword was unsheathed. The snow-white blade was stained with dried blood. It was directly pressed against Su Ke's throat. I've seen your choice. I'm too lazy to talk nonsense with you. Jiang Pengji's face was also covered in blood. Most of the sticky red blood had dried up, but there was still some hanging on her face, covering her expression. Only her cold and murderous eyes could be seen clearly. Su Xiaoyu, I hate betrayers the most. Those who betray me, regardless of their status or achievements. In front of me, only death awaits them. Not long ago, Qiguan Rang pleaded for mercy in front of Jiang Pengji, but she rejected him. Wenzheng, betrayal is betrayal. When he did it, he was already a dead man. Of course, Qiguan Rang's plea was not useless. Originally, Jiang Pengji wanted Su Ke to suffer the death penalty of 1,000 cuts. Now, she changed it to beheading him herself. I'll cut off the relationship between our master and her subject. Su Ke, don't let me see you in your next life. You must remember to stay away from me when you see me. Your betrayal disgusts me. How much did Jiang Pengji hate those who betrayed her? Su Ke's corpse was hung in the sun in Jin Qichuan for decades. After the establishment of the Jiang dynasty, Su Ke's friends who were on good terms with him put in a good word for him so that he could be buried in peace. However, they were reprimanded one by one. In serious cases, they were ordered to go home and reflect on themselves for 2 months. Until the 2nd year after Emperor Chen's death, the new emperor granted amnesty. Only then could Jin Qichuan's corpse be buried. At first, it was impossible. It was the late emperor's order to expose Su Ke's corpse to the sun. Jiang Yan did not want to change her order when her mother had just passed away. However, the one who submitted the memorial was the assistant minister, Qiguan Rang. She had to treat it with caution. Su Ke deserved his fate, but I really don't want this to become one of the pieces of evidence for the people to accuse the late emperor of being ruthless. The late emperor did not care about his reputation when he was alive, but Qiguan Rang had to. Jin Qichuan's corpse had been hanging in the wind and rain for nearly 30 years. It was enough. Okay, I'll think about it. Many years later, Jiang Yan was tidying up her mother's belongings out of boredom. She found a strange small box. There was a faded memorial book in the box. Jiang Yan took a closer look and found that it was a memorial from Su Ke's best friend, asking for Su Ke's pardon. Her mother's response was only one word. Yes. Decades of resentment, as the people in the story passed away one by one, became a few ink marks in the history books. Please remember the original domain name of this book. Jiutian Shenhuang Mobile Version Website. Chapter 1850. As the saying goes, if you get a good ID, you'll be spammed all the time. Su Ke didn't expect that his random ID would be spammed every day by idiotic netizens. Just as My 2 to 3 Years with Emperor Chen was a hit, Su Ke's ID became a hot topic. Every day, his colleagues would chat about him. Qiguan Rang whispered to him, "Brother, we're fated. Why don't we join the group?" Everyone in the group was talented. Whispered to Qiguan Rang, "I'm not going. I told you I'm not cosplaying. That's my real name." Qiguan Rang whispered to him, "Ugh. I feel sorry for you. But did your parents really not hate you for giving you this name?" Whispered to Qiguan Rang, "There are thousands of people named Su Ke in the country. It can't be that every parent has a grudge against their child." Who knew that an unknown person in history would become the male lead of a one-unit drama? Su Ke was a famous person that everyone who knew about the history of the Jiang dynasty knew. In reality, there weren't many documents about him. History books only recorded his birth and death years, a brief description of his short life, and the famous hanging corpse incident. Regardless of whether it was official or unofficial history, Su Ke's records weren't very long. Usually, Su Ke was mentioned for only one reason: to criticize how vengeful and violent Emperor Chen was. That was the Su Ke of history. Now, Su Ke was just an ordinary student at Tianhua University. At most, he was the top scorer in the provincial examinations. Why did his parents give him such a name? According to the monk, it seemed that it was because his fate was relatively light. Before he entered high school, Su Ke didn't think there was anything wrong with his name. It wasn't until he studied the history of the Jiang dynasty in his first year of high school that Su Ke became famous smiley face angle, from his first year of high school to his second year, Su Ke wasn't willing to tell people his name. However, after My 2 to 3 Years with Emperor Chen was broadcasted, the low-key Su Ke suddenly became famous. Not only in real life, but also on the internet. My 2 to 3 Years with Emperor Chen was a well-crafted one-unit drama. It mainly focused on the interactions between the male and female leads of each unit, and then pieced together the life of the first female emperor of the Jiang dynasty. Of course, the so-called male lead did not mean that he and the female lead had romantic feelings. In fact, this drama was excessively clean, and there was not a single hint of ambiguity between a man and a woman. The so-called male protagonist of a unit was merely the male character who had the most scenes in the corresponding unit. Up until now, the show had already had 2 male leads, and it was currently serialized in the Su Qi chapter. As one of the most popular dramas in the summer, the royal family had recommended it, and it immediately exploded on the internet. Unfortunately, Su Ke had become the fish in the moat. He looked at the wave after wave of family recognition and sympathy on the private chat interface. There were even people who maliciously asked him about his experience of being left to dry for 30 years. Bah, he was still a 23-year-old young man. How could he have been left to dry for 30 years? He clicked on the top right corner of the mouse and closed the game. I really don't understand. What right does a nobody with less than 100 words in history have to be the male lead of a popular national drama? Su Ke sat on the upper bunk and angrily unlocked his phone. He logged into the membership app and scrolled to the latest episode of My 2 to 3 Years with Emperor Chen. He said to his roommate, "I heard that the royal family released a batch of historical documents. What does it have to do with Su Ke? What does it have to do with me?" His roommate said, "I don't know about that. I heard it from old Nye." The old Nye his roommate mentioned was called Nye Guangshan. He was also an unlucky person who had clashed with a famous historical figure. But Nie Guangshan was much better than Su Ku. At the very least, he had clashed with a genius from Zhongzhou, while Su Ku had clashed with an unlucky person who had been left to dry for 30 years. Su Ku said, "Could it be that the historical documents released by the royal family have a lot of records of Su Ku?" His roommate replied without looking up, "I heard so. I heard that the scriptwriter of My 2 to 3 Years with Emperor Chen used many connections to move the royal family in order to have enough material to recreate historical figures. Isn't the official Weibo of the royal family the Zhenxiang faction?" Before the broadcast, he arrogantly said that he didn't want to watch it, but after the broadcast, he kept saying that it smelled good and Weibo 3 meals a day. Su Ku's third appearance must have some unknown secrets. The official history of the Jiang dynasty had only appeared in about 100 words, but he was qualified to have a place in a drama. There was a lot going on behind the scenes. Su Ku calmed down upon hearing this and tapped on the first episode of Su Chi chapter. By the time he saw the latest episode, the sky outside had already darkened. His roommate finally finished playing the game. Without looking up, he said, "Old Su, remember to bring me some takeout when you come back." Su Ku held his phone and didn't move. His roommate said again, "The dormitory is so dark. Old Su, please light the lights before you leave." Su Ku still didn't move. "Old Su, you're leaving?" His roommate looked up and realized that Su Ku didn't look too good. "Old Su? Are you okay?" The sky was dark, but it hadn't completely sunk yet. His roommate could see the dense sweat on Su Ku's forehead. Su Ku then came back to his senses and was shocked to find that his forehead was covered in sweat. "Me? I'm fine. I'm just a little obsessed with the drama." His roommate said, "You're watching My 2 to 3 Years with Emperor Chen? I heard from the netizens that Su Chi chapter is quite cruel. Watching it once is like being stabbed by a knife." I remember that before the broadcast, there was an editor wearing a sock jacket who said that every episode was cruel. I didn't dare to watch it at first. Su Ku said casually, "History isn't perfect to begin with. How can you expect the officials to give out sweets?" Although Su Chi chapter was only 2/3 of the way through, according to the historical context, the plot would become more and more cruel. His roommate said, "I don't expect the officials to give out sweets. I just hope that it doesn't rain knives. The last unit tortured me so much that my heart and lungs were hurting. It wasn't easy to get sweets these days." Even though he knew that there was poison in the sugar, there was sh*T in the poison, and there were knives in the sh*T, he still had to carefully lick the sugar coating clean. Even if it was a rain of knives, he still had to lick out the taste of the sugar. Su Ku didn't say anything. Was it so cruel that it made his heart hurt? Su Ku didn't feel that it was cruel. Instead, he felt that something was stuck in his heart and throat, making him feel inexplicably uncomfortable. Looking at the entanglement of the male and female protagonists on the screen, it was as if he had been pulled into it and experienced it himself. His roommate climbed out of bed and turned on the lights. Seeing Su Ku's pale face, he quickly asked Su Ku if he wanted to go to the hospital. "I'm fine. I just feel a little uncomfortable." "Old Su, how can you call that fine?" Su Ku was dragged to the hospital by his roommate for a checkup. The results showed that everything was fine. On the way back to the dormitory, Su Ku said, "I told you that I'm in good health. I just had a full body checkup a few days ago." His roommate said, "You can't blame me. If not for your pale face, I would have been shocked." When they returned to the dormitory, another roommate, Nie Guangshan, was browsing Weibo on his phone. "What's wrong with old Su?" Nie Guangshan looked concerned. Su Ku shook his head and didn't say anything. His roommate said, "Old Su suddenly looked very pale. I accompanied him to the hospital for a checkup." "What did the checkup find?" His roommate said, "Nothing. He's strong and lively. He's probably too engrossed in watching a television series." Nie Guangshan seemed to have known about it. 2 years between me and Empress Chen. Su Ke felt a little embarrassed. He was so engrossed in watching a television series that he really thought he was a character in the series. Nie Guangshan looked at Su Ke from head to toe and sighed. It's your birthday in a few days. You have a 3-day holiday. Do you want to go out and relax? His birthday was the birthday of the current empress, and the whole nation had a 3-day holiday. This custom had been carried on since the early years of the Jiang dynasty. A group of netizens joked that it was one of the greatest contributions of the Jiang dynasty. Su Ke asked, "Where are we going?" Nie Guangshan said, "Su Ke's tomb in Jinxichuan." His roommate almost choked on his saliva. "Old Nie, are you crazy?" Colliding with a historical figure was bad enough. Nie Guangshan, this old fox, was still encouraging Su Ke to visit the ruins of the human cemetery. See what? See how that place exposed a corpse to the sun for 30 years? Nie Guangshan rolled his eyes and said, "Just tell me, are you going or not?" Su Ke said, "Yes." His roommate shook his head helplessly. "Both of you are crazy. What's there to see in a cemetery?" Nie Guangshan said, "I received some vague information from my mentor. The imperial family seems to have donated a cultural relic to the Su Ke Memorial Hall." His roommate was shocked. The imperial family will take the initiative to donate a cultural relic? Did the sun rise from the west? Anyone with a bit of historical knowledge would know that the Jiang dynasty's imperial family was one of the weirder ones in history. The imperial family advocated frugality and had simple funerals. Before Emperor Chen died, he told young Emperor Jiang Yan that no living person, jade, gold, silver, copper, or iron should be buried with him. This became a custom passed down through the generations of the Jiang dynasty's emperors. Every generation's imperial mausoleum was as clean as if it had been raided by thieves. According to historical records, the most extravagant emperor was Jiang Renzong. He had 2 more gold medallions than his ancestors. These 2 gold medallions were obtained after Jiang Renzong fought hard with the imperial family and the ministers. Smiley face angle, even the burial was so simple, let alone the daily savings. The only thing that could be considered rich was probably the various historical records or the calligraphy and collections of the previous emperors. However, these things were the private property of the imperial family. If they were not willing to take them out, the outside world could not force them. For so many years, they had never heard of the imperial family taking anything from the outside, let alone donating cultural relics. Just for this reason alone, they had to go and take a look. Due to the broadcast of the popular national drama, My 2 Years with Emperor Chen, the search for the famous historical figure Su Ke had skyrocketed. Even his memorial was flooded with visitors. People came not only to join in the fun, but also to see the cultural relics donated by the imperial family. The memorial was not big, and there were not many things on display. The only pictures and photos were still from the hit shows. His roommate said in boredom, "There's nothing to see." Nie Guangshan did not speak. He only looked at Su Ke with a slightly gloomy gaze. After Su Ke arrived at the memorial, he did not look right. His face was so pale that it looked like it had been rubbed with a layer of white ash. He looked as dead as a corpse. They had arrived early, so there were not many visitors in the memorial. Su Ke stood in front of the glass in the center of the memorial hall. His eyes seemed to be caught by something. He stared at the faded memorial that had been there for ages. Even though it had been through hundreds of years, the memorial was still well preserved. The ink on it was clearly visible. Jiang Chao's handwriting was quite different from modern characters. His roommate could only make out a few lines. What is written on it? Something about 70 years old, remaining life, last wishes. His roommate murmured. Some words could be guessed correctly, but some could only be skipped. This is a memorial to plead for Su Ke. Nie Guangshan smiled and read the second half of the memorial that his roommate could not understand. I am 65 years old, deaf and blind. Now that I am about to retire, I should be grateful for the Emperor's kindness, but I still have a regret for the rest of my life. Today, I beg your Majesty to pardon the sinful Su Ku and bury his body. His spirit in heaven will be grateful for your Majesty's benevolence. I will weep. Those who have studied history know that those who pleaded for Su Ku's life were all punished. Su Ku's body was only buried after the new emperor ascended to the throne. Emperor Chen had never forgiven Su Ku when he was alive and hated him to the core. It was written in history books, but take a closer look at the emperor's reply to the memorial. His roommate was about to take a closer look when he realized that Su Ku could not help but put his hand on the glass, as if he was reaching for the memorial. But, she actually wrote "can." His roommate was baffled by his words. Old Su, is he bewitched? Nie Guangshan shrugged. Who knows if he's bewitched, but I'm sure, it's not a bad thing. His roommate was stunned. Not a bad thing? Old Su's eyes turned red, and tears fell. He cried just like that. Was there a faucet in the tear ducts of a man? She actually wrote "can." Su Ku was still in a daze when he walked out of the memorial hall. Nie Guangshan sent his roommate to buy food. He patted Su Ku's shoulder and sighed. It's time to let go of all the grudges. As time went by, the once heroic figure had become a few words in history books. I thought she would never forgive me. Su Ku's gaze was different from usual. His eyes were full of old age and tiredness, but also relief. That memorial was more like a redemption for him, allowing him to completely free himself from this grudge. The Jiang dynasty had been in turmoil for 300 years. That person had proved to him how narrow-minded and bigoted he was back then. Please remember this book's domain name. 9 Heavens Shenhuang mobile version website. Chapter 1851. Xiaoyu, have you encountered any difficulties recently? After the court session ended, Jiang Pengji discussed trivial matters with the ministers. When everyone dispersed, she asked Su Ku to stay for a private conversation. Su Ku looked puzzled. I have nothing important recently. Your Majesty suddenly asked about this. I'm confused. Jiang Pengji pointed at the few memorials piled on the desk and said to Su Ku with a heavy expression, these memorials are all against you. At a rough glance, there were at least a dozen books. Su Ku was a low-key official. Although he was one of the most important officials, he rarely caused trouble. The imperial censor couldn't find anything to use against him even if they wanted to, unlike Feng Zhen, who had an average of more than 20 books every month for the past year. If it wasn't for problems with his speech, then it was for his behavior. If it wasn't for the fact that he had too many problems with government affairs, Feng Zhen was covered in lice. Su Ku had always been the imperial censor's forbidden area. They wouldn't be able to pick out any mistakes even if they stayed there for half a year. The contents of the memorials were very uniform. They were roughly divided into two types. One type said that Su Ku didn't go home after work and wandered around. This was not the role model a good official should have. One said that Su Ku had a mistress outside even though he hadn't taken a concubine, which seriously damaged the positive image of the court in the new era. As the saying goes, cultivate one's moral character, govern one's family, govern one's country, and bring peace to the world. They felt that Su Ku should be punished for having a mistress outside when he didn't even figure out his own affairs. Jiang Pengji was dumbfounded. She didn't know if it was because the political situation was too stable or because everyone had nothing better to do, but the imperial censors were gossiping like paparazzi. Although it was their duty, Jiang Pengji felt helpless every time she saw trivial gossip piled up on her desk. She gave the imperial censors a lot of power to speak and allowed them to participate in memorials to the emperor and the people. This was so that they could be the supervisory body of the court and constantly remind the emperor and the officials to pay attention to their words and morals. But as time went by, the style seemed to have changed. Of course, this wasn't the point. The imperial censor's enthusiasm couldn't be dampened. Jiang Pengji could only swallow 10,000 curses in her heart. The most important thing was that the person who was implicated was Su Ku. Considering the years of trust between the emperor and the minister, Jiang Pengji didn't publish it for the time being. She planned to find the person involved to understand the situation. Not only was Su Ku an important minister, but he was also an old minister. He had to maintain his dignity, and Jiang Pengji could not disregard his dignity just because of a trivial matter. That was why the scene above happened. Su Ku looked at the pile of memorials and realized the severity of the situation. Jiang Pengji said, "The imperial censor wouldn't make things up, but I didn't completely believe it. There must be a reason for this, so I came to ask you about it." Su Ku sighed. "This is my fault. I didn't handle my family affairs well and let them taint your majesty's ears." Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows. Her eyes were filled with unfriendliness. "Did you really have an affair like what the memorial said? Did you come here to make trouble?" "Wait a minute," it was as if they were not talking about the same thing. Su Ku asked, "What mistress? What did these imperial censors report to him?" Jiang Pengji briefly explained it, and Su Ku was almost frightened by the imperial censor's logic. "Xiaoyu, although Xuanmei is no longer young, she is still your wife who has accompanied you for many years. She takes care of your aunt, takes care of your children, and takes care of everything in the mansion so that you don't have to worry about anything. She has given birth to your children. She didn't complain when you were away for so many years. Even if she doesn't have any merits, she has worked hard. If you really had an affair behind her back, wouldn't that make her lose face?" Jiang Pengji seriously criticized and educated Su Ku. In the early days of the Jiang dynasty, the marriage laws were also further divided and adjusted. Men could have concubines as long as they met the requirements. Their ancestors had a powerful background, or they themselves were powerful, or their wives were infertile. Men could have a concubine when they were over 30 years old, but the requirements were still relatively stringent. Su Ku had the right to have a concubine, but he didn't bring her home. Instead, he hid it, and in the end, the mistress came to make trouble. This hurt Xuanmei twice. If word got out, not only would people say that Su Ku was unscrupulous, but they would also say that Xuanmei was not good at all and that her usual attitude was fake. If it was light, people would gossip about her, and if it was heavy, her reputation would be ruined. Su Ku was not a muddle-headed person, but why did he make such a mistake on this matter? "Your Majesty, this matter. I am also wronged. There is no mistress or mistress, there is nothing." There was a rather strange phenomenon. It was hard to say for the officials outside, but the officials in the capital were more restrained and didn't have many concubines in their backyards. In the previous dynasty, it was common for an official to have 3 or 4 concubines, and there might be 6 or 7 who had no status to warm their feet. But now, firstly, the emperor was a female. Secondly, the marriage laws were more mature and detailed about concubines, so there were fewer loopholes to exploit. Most of the concubines in the backyards of the officials in the capital were there before the founding of the country. After the founding of the country, the number of concubines declined sharply. For senior and important officials like Su Ku, who had qualifications and lived in the heart of the emperor, most of them only had one wife in their backyards. Of course, there was no lack of those who got rid of their old wives when they were in power. As a result, the old wife went to the imperial censor and the ex-husband was fired. When Han Yu, the crazy man, revised the marriage laws, he emphasized one rule: those who were first lowly and then noble, were not allowed to marry. What did that mean? It meant that if a man was a poor man before he married his wife, he was not allowed to divorce his wife after he became rich, unless his wife committed a serious crime. Of course, when he revised the marriage laws for the third time, Han Yu added a few more words: those who were first lowly and then noble, were not allowed to marry. The reason for the revision was that there were scumbags among the female officials, and their husbands were too weak. Han Yu thought that the husband and wife should unite on this kind of issue. It was everyone's responsibility to protect the weak. Anyway, according to the newly revised marriage laws, Su Ke's behavior was against the law. Not only would he be fined, but he would also be demoted and forced to reflect on his mistakes. Jiang Pengji didn't fully believe what he said. Private friendship was private friendship. As a friend, Jiang Pengji naturally believed Su Ke. But as an emperor, she treated her officials fairly and would not be partial to Su Ke or the imperial censor. Go ahead. Su Ke started to talk and poured out his grievances. Did those meddlesome imperial censors think that he was willing to get off work and not go home? He was forced to not go home. It was said that the mistress in the mansion was not a mistress, and the mistress was not a mistress. Then who is she? Su Ke said, she is the daughter of my aunt's widowed sister's eldest daughter. In terms of seniority, she is my distant niece. Jiang Pengji said, a cousin is a 3,000-mile relationship. Su Ke felt a little wronged after hearing her complaints. It was stressful for an official to have such a vexing emperor. How did your distant niece become your mistress? Su Ke sighed. The old lady in the mansion is old and likes to stay with the younger generation. She is soft-hearted and kind. She couldn't help but help when she saw this relative was living a miserable life. The old lady is kind-hearted, but I didn't expect her to be so ambitious. I guess she was blinded by the prosperity of the capital and had thoughts that she shouldn't have. Anyway, I can't drive her away for fear that she will make a fuss in front of the old lady. The old lady has been spoiled for so many years that she doesn't care about other people's business. I don't want to put her in a difficult position. So, I have to move out for a few days. Su Ke's mother passed away when he was young. The only female elder who was close to him was his aunt. His aunt was also unfortunate. She lost her husband when she was young and had no children. She devoted her motherly love to Su Ke and treated him like her own child. His aunt was the old lady with the highest status in the mansion. Su Ke had always treated her like a filial son. After so many years, even if they weren't mother and son, they were more like mother and son. The old lady was old and didn't know how many more days she could enjoy in her later years. Seeing that the old lady had a poor relative, she wanted to help them. Su Ke naturally agreed and discussed with Xuanmei to bring them over. Speaking of which, his aunt's niece also had a hard life. She lost her husband when she was young and struggled to survive with her daughter alone. Her daughter also had a hard life. She married a gangster and her husband was beaten to death by debt collectors. His aunt's niece was very insecure about everything she had. She always felt that her current wealth and glory were all because of Su Ke's aunt. Once the old lady passed away, she, her daughter, and her young granddaughter would definitely be driven away. Thus, she had a crooked idea. She heard that the mistress of the mansion, Xuanmei, was a maidservant and looked down on her. Even a maidservant could become the wife of the current Minister of Revenue. It shouldn't be a problem for his daughter to be a concubine, right? After Su Ke got off work, he often saw his niece, who was extremely beautiful, casting flirtatious glances at him, both overtly and covertly. As a smart person, Su Ke understood. She wanted to seduce him. I'll hide outside for 2 days. Ask the old lady what's going on. If she still doesn't understand, send her out. This was what Su Ke discussed with his wife. Xuanmei said, "You're not accepting them?" Su Ke said, "Why should I accept them? It's not as simple as adding a pair of chopsticks to the house. The more people there are, the more trouble there will be. I'm already worried about the mother and daughter. If I accept them, won't the mansion be peaceful? If my children find out, how can I, as an old father, feel. For an ordinary man, taking in a concubine was like raising a pet and adding a pair of chopsticks. However, it wasn't that simple to carry it out. For example, one of the assistant ministers of the Ministry of Personnel had a falling out with his wife. In a fit of anger, the wife said that she only cared about the food, drinks, housing, and transportation of the family, and didn't care about the concubines or foot warmers. She said that the husband should take care of the concubines or foot warmers. It was because the assistant minister didn't understand women and his wife's son was wrong that she exploded. The unlucky man was angered by his wife's words and said that his wife didn't need to care about the concubines or foot warmers. Then, the matter was exposed by the imperial censor. The officials of the court also witnessed the miserable days of the assistant minister working during the day and taking care of the concubines' food, clothing, housing, and transportation at night. It was also this wife who started it. The other wives followed suit after seeing the effect. It was their duty to take care of their parents-in-law, raise their children, and take care of the household. However, the concubines were the husband's assets and were considered extra work. The wife took care of the concubines and the concubines' children. Even if it wasn't meritorious, it was hard work. The wife should be given an extra salary. If she couldn't afford it, she would take care of it herself. However, this evil trend was recognized and supported by the emperor. The officials of the court were speechless. They cursed the assistant minister 10,000 times in their hearts. Su Ke didn't have the intention to take in a concubine. He looked down on the daughter of his aunt's younger sister. If it wasn't for the old lady, Su Ke would have chased them away. He didn't expect the imperial censor to expose him while he was hiding. This matter was more serious. Jiang Pengji rested her chin on her hand and said, "If this is true, the imperial censor will have to rectify it." The imperial censor wasn't a paparazzi. The content of the report should be detailed and true. He shouldn't make up gossip, distort the truth, and increase her workload. As for Su Ke, it was better to let him go back and deal with the mess at home. It wasn't good to have such a scandal at his age. Su Ke could only go home with a bitter face. After a few days, the house was quiet. Of course, it wasn't Su Ke who settled it, nor was it Sun Mei. It was the old lady who took the initiative to let the relatives leave. She gave them money and sent them away. The old lady said, "I thought it would be good to take care of the relatives. It would be fun to be a family, but I can't let it affect your business." Su Ke was speechless. Sun Mei asked, "How did you know about this?" "I heard it when I went out to play cards with a few old sisters." "You and your wife are the same. This matter concerns Jean Er's future. Why hide it from me? I'm old, and I'm sensitive, but I can tell right from wrong. I'm embarrassed by my old sister's words." The old lady felt wronged. Sun Mei and Su Ke could only lower their heads and admit their mistakes. The storm passed just like that. Su Ke was ordered to write a memorial to reflect on himself. The imperial censor who submitted the memorial was also pulled away by the emperor to criticize and educate him. At this time, Feng Yi, who had traveled around for many years and made many achievements, returned to the capital. Feng Zhen happily went to the emperor to find out what was going on. By relying on her outstanding achievements in the impoverished counties that she had been sent out for nearly 10 years, Feng Yi was able to obtain a high official position in the capital. In the end, censor. Censor? Why did he become an imperial censor? Jiang Pengji said, "He admonishes the emperor and supervises the officials." What's wrong with being an imperial censor? The imperial censors of the Jiang dynasty could not only stay in the capital to keep an eye on the officials, but they could also be sent out to supervise various places. Feng Zhen was speechless. As someone who was dissed by the imperial censor every day, wasn't it troublesome for the eldest son of the legal wife to become an imperial censor? If his son did not do well, he would lose face. If his son climbed to the top of the imperial censor, he would be even more annoyed. It was troublesome no matter what. Why can't my eldest son get over it? Jiang Pengji pouted. Look at the province that Feng Yi is in charge of inspecting. Fengzhen felt even more annoyed. That was the place where his daughter-in-law was appointed, or perhaps Feng Yi, this unfilial son, ran to become an imperial censor just to form a couple with his wife? He cared about his wife and ignored his father. If outsiders knew that Fengzhen's eldest son became an imperial censor, how could he mingle in front of the officials? I definitely don't agree to this. I definitely don't agree. Fengzhen pulled his son over to give him a serious lecture as soon as he returned home. Feng Yi did not move and secretly gave his younger brother, Feng Yu, a look. Feng Yu understood and took advantage of his father's rage to sneak out to get help. The moment his mother made a move, it was clear whether she was real or not. This time, it was Fengzhen's turn to be lectured. What's wrong with being an imperial censor? Is it a disgrace to the Feng family? Although the rank of an imperial censor was not high, not everyone could become one. The requirements were stricter than ordinary officials. Not only did one have to forget personal interests and country, but one also had to be upright, straightforward, and daring to speak his mind. They had to be knowledgeable, be familiar with government affairs, and be knowledgeable about the past and present. Feng Yi was able to become an imperial censor at such a young age, so he had a solid foundation. His only regret was that he offended too many people. If Feng Yi could become an imperial censor, it would mean that the emperor had high recognition of his abilities and knowledge. Fengzhen was an old man. The older he got, the more confused he became. Feng Yi silently followed his younger brother out of the door. It was inconvenient for the son to be present when his father was being lectured by his wife. After all, his father was very prideful. Are you close to His Highness Yen? His younger brother nodded. It's a blessing to be valued by His Highness. Don't let your guard down. Feng Yi caressed her brother's head. My little brother is getting cuter and cuter. Feng Yi nodded and smiled innocently. First, set a small goal. For example, remember in 1 second, Booksellers Mobile. Chapter 1852. If Han Yu were to rank the most attractive officials in the court, he would definitely be in the top 5, if not the top 3. If he were to go back more than 10 years, he would probably be number 1 when he was in the prime of his youth. Even though he was in his 40s, he took good care of himself. Not only did his appearance not deteriorate, but it also became more and more mellow like a fine wine. Of course, being an official in the Jiang dynasty was different from the past. In the past, Han Yu might have been able to climb to the position of one of the 3 chancellors and 9 ministers with a smooth career. In today's world, he could only rely on his talent. As for his appearance, it was fine as long as his facial features were regular. Fortunately, Han Yu was not only good-looking, but also talented and capable. His conduct was also top-notch. Even so, Han Yu was the least popular among the officials. Most of the officials who were willing to make friends with him were his friends when they were young. Why was that? In terms of official position, Han Yu was also an important official in the emperor's heart. He was in charge of the Ministry of Penalty, one of the 6 ministries. He was in charge of the justice and prisons of the country. In the previous dynasty, the Ministry of Penalty didn't have much power. Only civilians or officials below the 7th rank had the power to punish them. The Supreme Court had the power to punish them. The middle and senior officials were also tortured by other departments, and the Ministry of Penalty couldn't be locked up. But in the Jiang dynasty, the Ministry of Penalty was a proper department with real power. Almost all the officials except for the imperial censor didn't want to provoke it. It was one of the 3 departments in charge of the final trial and review of major cases. In addition to being in charge of the Ministry of Penalty, Han Yu also had other titles. At the same time, he was also in charge of the Supreme Court. In terms of real power, Han Yu was definitely the most powerful person in the early years of the Jiang dynasty. He even dared to confront Qiguan Rang. Most importantly, the emperor was on Han Yu's side. Such a person should be flattered and flattered by everyone. They should be eager to trample on the threshold of others. Why was Han Yu so unpopular? Because his main job was not only to try criminal cases, but also to lead the drafting of national laws. Which official dared to say that he was clean? It wasn't that the officials were bad, but their families, the servants in the mansions, the relatives of the servants in the mansions, the messy distant relatives and neighbors all liked to use chicken feathers as an arrow of authority. Even if these officials wanted to restrain them, they couldn't guarantee that there would be no problems. Once something went wrong and they were caught by Han Yu, they would be punished and educated if they were lucky, or demoted to another place if they were unlucky. It was common for people to lose their lives. For example, there was once an official's brother-in-law who committed a crime. According to the old law, he should be able to escape punishment. Even if he didn't lose his limbs, at least he would be able to keep his life. In the end, Han Yu wrote a petition saying that the old law was problematic. If the old law was followed, the victims would die in vain and the common people would complain about the court. Therefore, he suggested that the case be reviewed. The old law was right in the past, but it was not perfect today. Basically, those who were retried in Han Yu's hands were doomed. The brother-in-law of an official was executed by 1,000 cuts in public. His wife's younger brother was the only male member of the Yu clan. The official's wife cried, threw a tantrum, and even wanted to hang herself. Because of this, the official was implicated by the imperial censor and was even reprimanded and demoted. Examples like this could be found everywhere. Han Yu had offended almost everyone in the imperial court. Unfortunately, the other party had His Majesty as his backer. Even the imperial censor, who was usually disrespectful to the heavens and earth, did not dare to provoke him. The other officials could only avoid him. They couldn't afford to provoke this fiend, but couldn't they just hide from it? It turned out that Han Yu would set them up even if they tried to hide from him. Just the marriage law alone, this fellow had petitioned His Majesty to amend it 3 times. Men, after all, always had a bit of a bad habit. For example, there were 3 big happy events in the folk jokes: promotion, wealth, and death of wife _ smiley face angle _ promotion and wealth were needless to say. Death of wife was a justifiable reason to get rid of his wife and replace her with a young, beautiful, well-educated woman who was worthy of him. Even if his old wife could not die, he still wanted to get 3 or 4 concubines and 6 or 7 to warm his feet. He wanted to experience the comfort and novelty of being a groom every night. As a result, Han Yu had collected thousands of marriage case files and obtained the marriage laws of the previous dynasties. He had revised the marriage laws 3 times according to the current situation of the Jiang dynasty. He clearly marked the places that were more vague and could be exploited, and subdivided the various regulations. Just the rule that those who are first lowly and then noble are not allowed to go was enough to stop many big pig trotters from thinking of changing to a younger wife. How many legal wives did he support? Not only could they not change their wives at will, but they also couldn't take concubines at will. Taking concubines, no matter if they were cheap concubines, good concubines, noble concubines, or unnamed legal wives, either their ancestors or themselves had to be awesome. If they couldn't meet these 2 requirements, they could only take a concubine when they were over 30 years old and their legal wife had no children. In the early years of the Jiang dynasty, surgical skills had developed quite well. There were also certain treatments for diseases such as smallpox, and the neonatal mortality rate was the lowest in history every year. As for these marriage laws, the ministers had no solid reason to oppose them. Of course, there were policies and countermeasures. There were still some men who wanted to touch young and beautiful girls, and they could only turn a blind eye to them. But if there were irrefutable evidence such as sons and daughters of concubines, things would be different. To sum up, Han Yu was indeed the most unlikable minister with enemies everywhere. In sharp contrast to Han Yu's bad relationship with others, his wife, Madame Tao, was invincible in diplomacy. She was the leader in the circle of noble ladies in the capital. Han Yu was so busy that he couldn't go home for a few times a year, so it was inevitable that he neglected the family. His wife, Madame Tao, had some conflicts with him, but she was good at taking care of the family, so Han Yu was naturally at ease. After a few years, Han Yu's busy work came to an end. He was asked to stay in the hall by the emperor for a private talk. Let's not talk about official affairs today. Let's talk about the private affairs of the family. The emperor looked serious. Han Yu was confused. After all, a private talk in the hall was usually a benefit for officials who made mistakes. Please go ahead, Your Majesty. Jiang Pengji said, Yen is getting old. I'm going to find a study partner for her. Young friends can be her right-hand man in the future. I'm sure you're aware of this. I intend to let Wenbin's youngest son, Han Qi, study with Yen. But how do you teach your son? She said the first sentence with a kind face, but the last sentence was full of anger. Han Yu's heart skipped a beat. Today, I'm not talking to you as an emperor, but as a mother. Han Yu had been with Jiang Pengji for many years. He knew her temperament very well. As long as she didn't show any killing intent, it meant that the situation was serious, but it hadn't escalated to the level of political affairs. Since she said it was a private affair, it should be a private affair. Han Yu didn't know what happened, but he knew that he should apologize first. Jiang Pengji felt helpless and angry. She promoted Han Yu's youngest son, Han Qi, for Han Yu's sake. But this guy secretly humiliated Yen, and Yen heard it from the other side of the wall. She had never seen such a stupid person. He didn't even know how to be careful with his words in the palace. Hadn't he heard that walls have ears? When her daughter crossed out Han Qi's name, Jiang Pengji specifically asked. After all, promoting Han Qi was to show respect to his father, Han Yu. Jiang Yen sneered. My background is not worthy of his nobility. Jiang Pengji was furious when she heard that. She sent someone to investigate and found out that Han Qi was very serious when he entered the palace for the examination, but after the examination, he laughed privately with his peers and belittled Jiang Yen in a disdainful tone. Jiang Yen happened to come over to check on her future study partner. She heard the whole thing from the other side of the wall. Jiang Yen had excellent self-restraint. Although she was young, she didn't show her emotions. She removed Han Qi from the list without any nonsense. Jiang Pengji would promote Han Qi for Han Yu's sake because the two of them had been rulers and ministers for many years. It was reasonable for her to take care of him. However, Jiang Yen was the only heir to the throne. Why would she give Han Qi face? Who was Han Qi anyway? Therefore, Jiang Pengji prepared for 2 days. She waited for Han Yu to finish his work before she asked him to stay in the hall for a private talk. How did she teach her son? Han Yu listened to Jiang Pengji and his face turned pale. He directly knelt down and pretended to ask for forgiveness. He said that he would discipline his youngest son well when he returned and then bring him to Jiang Yen to ask for forgiveness. If Han Qi really went too far, Han Yu would break his legs. Not long ago, Bai Yuexia broke her son Shi Yu's legs with a rod and she divorced her husband. Outsiders didn't know the reason, but Han Yu knew something. Bai Yuexia dragged her son out of the Golden Scale Academy and broke his legs. It was His Majesty's order. It was most likely that Shi Yu had done something wrong that made His Majesty furious. At that time, Han Yu felt that Bai Yuexia did not teach her son well. Now it was his turn. Smiley face angle, what kind of sin did he commit? Jiang Pengji said, Han Qi's matter is still a small matter. Han Yu's face showed bitterness. That bastard disrespected the crown prince and humiliated the crown prince and the emperor. That was still a small matter. Han Yu was anxious. He didn't know what was a big matter. Jiang Pengji said, "Go back and inform your Yu family. Let them know that I know what they did in private." It should be said that Jiang Pengji had known it for a long time. Han Yu and Madame Tao of the Yu family had resumed their old business of selling illegal salt. Madame Tao quickly amassed wealth through the illegal salt business and occupied the people's land. After Jiang Pengji recruited Han Yu, she beat Madame Tao up. She cut off Madame Tao's illegal salt business and took away the people's land that they illegally occupied. Everything had been peaceful for many years. At first, Madame Tao was trembling with fear. She was afraid of Jiang Pengji's force and didn't dare to do anything. However, as Han Yu gained more power in the court, he could still be favored by the emperor by dissing the officials. Madame Tao began to get restless and began to resume her old business. Han Yu's face was so pale that ink could drip from it. "Do you know when it started, Your Majesty?" Jiang Pengji said, "It has been a while, but I kept it a secret. Madame Tao is a clown, but I can't implicate you." Han Yu was hated by hundreds of officials, but he was still alive and kicking because Jiang Pengji had been helping him behind his back. She even cleaned up other officials' dirty tricks when necessary. But Madame Tao was Han Yu's mother, so Jiang Pengji didn't have to be so polite. She took the initiative to reveal it to Han Yu. If Madame Tao made too much trouble, Jiang Pengji had to get rid of the tumor, even if it would slightly implicate Han Yu. Han Yu was her baby. Who was Madame Tao? "I am ashamed." Jiang Pengji said, "Let's not talk about it. You can leave now." It was destined to be a chaotic day. When Han Yu got home, he immediately punished Han Chi, who was usually spoiled, was beaten until he screamed in pain. Madame Tao didn't care about her manners as a noble lady. She almost ran to stop Han Yu. "Han Wenbin, why did you beat my son?" Han Yu said, "He slandered the crown prince's background as a bandit and said he was a lowly person." "Did he say that?" Han Chi's face changed. A guilty look flashed across his chubby and cute face. Han Run, the eldest son, said, "Isn't it known to the whole world?" As soon as he said that, his father, who had always been kind to him, slapped him for the first time. His face was tilted to one side. "Is it because of you?" Han Yu asked someone to catch Madame Tao. "What a coincidence. Both of you are punished by the family discipline. It's time to teach them a lesson." Han Run retorted angrily, "Teach what? I haven't been home for years. What can you teach me?" Han Yu felt like he was struck by lightning. You are two unfilial sons. When did he not teach them? When Han Yu was at home, the two sons were the ones he cared about the most. Han Run was forced to kneel down, but he still didn't give in. He said angrily and resentfully, "Unfilial sons? That's a good scolding. Do you know how much my brother and I have been implicated by you in the academy all these years? You have a good reputation outside. You have offended countless officials and we have been bullied again and again in the academy. You don't even know this. Now you are disciplining me and my brother for not knowing our duty." Of course, Han Run was resentful. How much had he and his brother suffered in the Golden Scale Academy? His father was fearless in dissing the officials, but they were ridiculed by the children of the officials. Han Run was resentful. He also hated Jiang Pengji for entrusting his father with such an important task, but she had attracted so much hatred, which had implicated his brother. He was even angrier when he heard that his brother was going to be chosen as the study companion of the crown prince. Wasn't it enough that he and his brother were being hated by others? Now he was punishing his brother for the sake of the crown prince. Who did he think he was? Did he think he was the emperor? Han Yu looked at his son, who looked familiar but had a strange temperament. He was so angry that he almost fainted. "Who taught you these words?" At this time, Mrs. Tao waved away the people who were trying to stop her. She protected her baby son who was crying with snot and tears all over his face. "I taught them personally." "What? Are you going to punish me in front of the servants?" Han Yu was so angry that he almost fainted. He couldn't even stand steadily. He was too tired from work and experienced such an exciting scene when he came home. He was already an Iron Man who didn't collapse. "I will deal with you later." That day, the Han's mansion was in a mess. The imperial censor who heard the news did not go there. Why? The emperor was watching. "Humph, carrot," Han Yu interrupted Mrs. Tao's illicit salt business as soon as she tasted the sweetness. He had thought that this matter would end like this, but a year and a half later, something unexpected happened. Mrs. Tao colluded with the gentry to rebel. After investigation, it was found that Han Yu's wife, Mrs. Tao, was involved and played a very important role. She made great contributions to the rebellion. Not only that, Han Yu's eldest son, Han Run, and his second son, Han Qi, were also involved. Their crimes were unforgivable. Because of this, Han Yu's house was confiscated. The leader of the confiscation was Fu Wang. He used to be Han Yu's enemy and they still didn't get along. If Han Yu was the leader of the civil officials, then Fu Wang was the leader of the generals, and he was the absolute leader. The two had been enemies for many years, and now it was finally over. The emperor has protected you for so many years, but you still made such a mistake. I really don't know what to say. Fu Wang led the team in person. Of course, he was ordered by Jiang Pengji not to be rude to the people of Han's mansion, especially Han Yu. Of course, Fu Wang couldn't be presumptuous with this order. But it was still okay to say a few words to get back at Han Yu. Han Yu, who was dressed in plain clothes, sneered indifferently. Han Yu has been loyal to the emperor all his life. How can he be compared to your good reputation as a minister of several families? You and I know very well whether there is a rebellion or not. Fu Wang was so angry that his face turned black. Damn it, Han Yu is such a bastard. That night, Jiang Pengji met Han Yu in person. Han Run and Han Qi will be sent to the frontier and will never be able to return home. The Tao family will be executed. Han Yu asked, "What about me?" "I never break my promise," Jiang Pengji said. "I will never change my promise to you." Han Yu shook his head. "Your Majesty, this is favoritism. If you are like this, what is the purpose of justice?" Jiang Pengji said, "But you are not involved in the rebellion. You don't deserve to die." Han Yu smiled and bowed to her. "The most fortunate thing in my life is to meet your Majesty and gain your Majesty's trust." Jiang Pengji stood still and looked at Han Yu for a long time. "Wenbin," Han Yu said, "it is my fault that I failed to teach my children and restrain my relatives. I can't defend myself." He knew that Jiang Pengji wanted to protect him. But he also knew that she couldn't. Someone was trying to overthrow the country. Madame Tao and Han Yu's three closest people were involved. It was impossible for him to be innocent in the eyes of the outside world. If Han Yu was innocent, not only would the laws of the Jiang dynasty be ridiculed, but the emperor would also be criticized by the later generations. Apart from that, there were many people in the court who wanted him dead. The emperor could suppress those voices, but it was not good for the court in the long run. It was not a wise emperor's choice to lose the overall situation for one person. He wanted justice, but the person who should be the most impartial was favoritism. If the emperor really did that, he would be trampling on the path that Han Yu had been pursuing for half his life. Han Yu said, "It's getting late. Your Majesty has a court meeting tomorrow. Go back to the palace first. I have nothing to do here." Jiang Pengji looked at his face deeply. "Wenbin," Han Yu smiled. "I know what I am doing. Your Majesty, don't worry." Jiang Pengji went back to the palace. Han Yu looked at the empty mansion. He washed his face, combed his hair, and put on the grandest clothes. Looking at the old man in the mirror, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. His life was full of ups and downs. When he was young, he had a good life. Who would have thought that he would be involved in a disaster? His family was confiscated, and Han Yu fell from heaven to hell overnight. It was like a reincarnation that couldn't be broken. Decades later, the family that he had painstakingly maintained also ended up being confiscated and exterminated. It was like a joke. He couldn't tell if he should hate himself or others. He ground the ink for himself and wrote a long letter of confession with a brush. Han Yu knew very well that his reputation would be ruined if the confession was made public. He would be nailed to the pillar of shame and be reviled by the later generations. But it didn't matter. When I am dead, I don't care about the flood behind me, Han Yu laughed at himself. He took out a hidden gold ingot from his sleeve and swallowed it. When the sky was bright, his body was already cold when the servants found him. Another 10 years later, the new emperor ascended to the throne. He followed his mother's last wish and overturned the case for Han Yu. Chapter 1853. Han Qi. Han Qi. My Han Ernyang, why are you throwing a tantrum again? It took the eldest son of the Qiguan family a long time to find Han Qi hiding in the rockery in the garden of the academy. The teenager hid in the rockery and wiped his tears. His cute baby face was covered with tear stains and his eyes were as red as a rabbit's. Who are you calling Han Ernyang? If you call me that again, I'll complain to Uncle Qiguan. Han Qi roared back angrily when he heard the rude address. The next second, he burped and ruined the little momentum. Okay, I was wrong. I won't call you Han Ernyang anymore. Han Qi's eyes widened, but he forgot why he was crying just now after being interrupted by his friend. Speaking of Han Qi, he was also a bully in class. It wasn't that he was rude and unreasonable. On the contrary, his personality was very soft, and his looks belonged to the type that could be easily bullied. This caused his older brother, Han Run, and his siblings to be worried. When they sent Han Qi to school, they threatened the entire class. 3 graduates of the Golden Scale Academy supported Han Qi, who in the class dared to provoke him. Not to mention bullying him in public, they had to think twice even if they wanted to run against him in secret. Han Run was still worried. He used his connections and asked the second generation he knew to take care of Han Qi at the same time. He told Han Qi, no matter who in the class says that you scold you or bully you, you can go home and complain. I'm sure you'll beat them up so badly that their own mothers won't recognize them and let our father bully their parents. He had a father that he couldn't afford to offend, 3 siblings that he couldn't afford to offend, and his second-generation friends that protected him. Almost no one dared to do anything to Han Qi. There were occasional conflicts, but Han Qi didn't suffer much. His life of studying in the Golden Scale Academy was quite relaxing. However, this relaxed atmosphere was soon broken. Han Qi saw his biological mother, Madame Tao, whom he hadn't seen for a few years. Madame Tao remarried a few years after she divorced Han Yu. She was now the second wife of someone else, managing the household and taking care of the legitimate children of her husband's ex-wife as well as her husband's illegitimate children. After a few years, she had aged and haggard. In order to consolidate her position in the backyard, she gave birth to another child in her early 40s, but the current husband obviously favored the legitimate children of his ex-wife. Madame Tao had no choice but to set her sights on her ex-husband's 2 sons. Han Run had been sent out to gain experience. The older he got, the more he had his own ideas. He was not close to his birth mother at all. Han Qi was different. He had a soft temperament, and this was the time when he longed for the care and concern of an elder. In this world, who else could he rely on more than his birth mother? After all, Han Qi was the flesh and blood she gave birth to after being pregnant for 10 months. Han Qi was not used to Madame Tao's kindness at first, but he did not refuse her kindness. It didn't take long for Madame Tao to reveal her true nature. She hoped that Han Qi could take care of her current husband's legitimate son. Of course, this legitimate son was not Madame Tao's biological son. It was the precious egg that her husband's predecessor gave birth to due to dystocia and bleeding. In terms of age, he was half a year older than Han Qi and was even in the class next to Han Qi, a chubby and fierce-looking little fatty. Han Qi didn't like him and didn't want to agree, but Madame Tao's words implied that Han Qi was inferior to her. She should take care of the little fatty so that Madame Tao's position in the family could be stable. Han Qi's personality was soft while little fatty was arrogant. He was bullied to the point of tears. He told Madame Tao about his grievances, but Madame Tao told him to bear with it. This made Han Qi extremely sad. Because he loved to cry, his close friends of the same age called him Han Ernyang. Han Qi didn't like it but didn't object. He turned around and gave them a nickname. The little fatty didn't know where he heard this from, but he actually laughed and wanted to take off Han Qi's pants to see if he had roots. If he had roots, why would he be called Han Ernyang? Han Qi broke free with grievances and ran to the rockery in the garden to cry. Then Qiguan Dalong, who was worried, came to find him. Qiguan Chong was furious when he heard this. Did that beast really do that and say that? Han Qi cried again. His eyes were as red as a rabbit's. Just you wait. I'll beat that bastard until his parents don't recognize him. Qiguan Chong's temperament was completely different from his father's. He was like a firecracker, exploding at the slightest touch. Although he exploded, this kid was also cunning. He didn't go to settle the score alone. He went to several different classes of different grades and called more than 20 people to beat them up together. This matter became big. Not only were the school teachers alarmed, but the parents of several children also knew. So many people beating one person. Isn't it not good? Han Qi hid behind Qiguan Chong like a rabbit and asked this person who was more like an older brother than an older brother. What are you afraid of? Don't you know that the law doesn't punish the masses? Therefore, Qiguan Chong, who said, the law doesn't punish the masses, was whipped by his father with a rattan cane. The law doesn't punish the masses? You've grown up. Qiguan Rang held the cane and said, today, I'll let you know that the law doesn't punish the masses. The more than 20 children who participated in the fight were basically the children of high-ranking officials in the court. There were sons and daughters. She didn't know how Qiguan Chong did it. He actually knew these children. When he said that his brother was bullied, these children all ran over to help. When Qiguan Rang heard that the cause was his son, he gritted his teeth in anger. His son was indeed a source of trouble. He was born to cause trouble for him. What was even more surprising was that after the 20 children were severely punished, they didn't resent Qiguan Chong. Instead, they showed an attitude of, brother, I'll bear the hardships with you and enjoy the blessings together. One by one, they silently accepted the punishment and limped home by their parents to continue to be punished. Han Qi was no exception. After all, he was the source of this vicious fight. However, Han Yu was a gentleman and he especially doted on his youngest son. A gentleman wouldn't punish his son with violence. He had to understand clearly before deciding how to punish him. After listening to his youngest son's pitiful narration, Han Yu was silent. He and Madame Tao had been separated for many years, but Madame Tao was still influencing the family like a ghost. Father, Han Yu asked him, do you want a mother? Han Qi? After a while, Han Qi said in a low voice, yes, but, having a stepmother meant having a stepfather. That's what they used to say. Han Yu said, I'll look around. If it's possible. I'll try to find a suitable one. He didn't have much hope for it. In this life, Han Yu was still the mascot who dissed the whole court. However, He was not only protected by Jiang Pengji, but also by Qiguan Rang, Wei Xiai, and other important ministers. Most of the ministers in the Golden Scale Academy were also inextricably linked to him. Not to mention that Master Yuanjing had been teaching at the Golden Scale Academy for so many years. The new generation of students under his tutelage had also entered the official ranks one after another. As the third disciple of Master Yuanjing, Han Yu was, in a sense, the senior brother of the new generation. Han Yu had offended many people, but his background was strong enough. Even so, he was still not competitive in the marriage market. As a man in his 40s, he had 2 legitimate sons, 1 illegitimate son, and 1 illegitimate daughter. Except for Han Qi, the other 3 were all adults and were still practicing and serving as officials. If the second wife married into the family, she would basically be a housekeeper. Even if she had children, she wouldn't be able to compete with the first few. Those who were well-matched in terms of social status didn't like Han Yu. They were old and had children. Han Yu was worried about those who were from a lower social status. Han Yu had seen too many women in the inner house who did crazy things to fight for the family property. Therefore, the promise he made to Han Qi was basically a verbal promise. Han Qi didn't care about it. Han Yu didn't care either. He greeted the official media and forgot about it. When Han Yu crawled out of the pile of files and took some time to let the servants shave his face, the official media came to the door. The servant was shaving Han Yu's beard when the official media came. "Why is the official media here? Run and the others are outside. The marriage is not urgent. Qi is still young." The servant had a strange look on his face. "Master, the official media is looking for you." Han Yu? His brain, which had been overloaded for half a year, finally dug out relevant memories from the depths of his memory. "Do you still remember this?" The servant couldn't help but cry and laugh. Han Yu was a rich man. He was probably the most difficult matchmaker the official media had ever been. He didn't dare to push an unsuitable candidate to the front of the official media. The servant said, "Master, it's rare that you have a day off today. Why don't you send him away?" Han Yu also wanted to say yes, but the official media had been looking for him for half a year. It wasn't good to send him away. "Let me see him." The official media bowed to Han Yu. After getting permission, he stood up and handed over the card and the picture of the candidate. "Which family?" Han Yu was a little curious. He also had some requirements for the target. It couldn't be a young and unmarried girl. He was over 40 years old. Why would an old man want to harm people? It would be best if the girl was educated and a widow. It would be best if she had a few children with her husband's family. Having children would mean having ties. She would treat Han Qi as her own and Han Yu would also take care of her children. The relationship of exchanging benefits made him feel more at ease. Han Yu also knew how busy he was. He was young and had fantasies about love. It would be a sin for him to marry someone. It would be better to choose a partner to live with. The official media revealed the information of the girl with a flattering smile. Han Yu happened to open the picture and was so shocked that he almost tore it apart. What a joke! Han Yu threw the picture on the table like a scourge. He didn't even look at the basic information of the girl. He was too familiar with the girl in the picture. Mi Yu came to the capital to report on her work half a year ago. She was a strong and fierce woman. She was the inspector of Ning province. She came to report on her work this time with the intention of being promoted again. The official media had sent a picture of such a woman to him. What a joke! They had even greeted each other yesterday. The official media said, "Your Excellency's portrait was also sent to them." They liked it very much. It wasn't a one-sided choice. Mi Yu chose Han Yu first and then the official media asked Han Yu for his opinion. Han Yu was speechless. He remembered that Mi Yu had a family. The official media said, "They have been separated for more than a year." Han Yu vaguely remembered that the news of Mi Yu's separation from her family had spread to the capital and caused quite a commotion. It seemed that the husband of the girl was still crying in front of her house and wanted to remarry. However, her heart was as hard as iron. The official media continued, "Your Excellencies are a match made in heaven." Han Yu waved his hand and signaled the official media to leave. A match made in heaven, my *SS. Listening to the official media, Mi Yu knew that it wasn't just a matter of a day or two. Then what was the meaning of little Chao's greeting yesterday as if nothing had happened? After thinking about it, Han Yu decided to go and ask her personally. Mi Yu seemed to have expected it. "I've been waiting for you." Han Yu was almost choked. Mi Yu handed a piece of paper to Han Yu. "Your Excellency, please take a look at this before you say anything." Han Yu looked down and his face almost cracked. "Your Excellency, please consider it. It's not a difficult request." Han Yu had a strange look on his face. Mi Yu said, "They have served me for many years. After so many years, we have developed a sisterly relationship. It's a waste of time to stay there, so I bought all their contracts of slavery. They will live a carefree life as long as I am alive in the future." Han Yu was speechless. Other people got married with gold, silver, and jewelry. When Mi Yu got married, she got married with her ex-husband's concubines. Yes, you read it right. She got married with her ex-husband's concubines. After Mi Yu divorced her ex-husband, she took away all the concubines of her ex-husband who were willing to leave. She even married them into her new husband's family. Ridiculous. Mi Yu said, "Of course I won't make things difficult for your Excellency. Their daily necessities, food, clothing, and other expenses are all paid for by me. They won't appear in front of your Excellency after marriage. They will only say that they are my dowry. They won't taint the reputation of your house. If the two of them got married, they could live together if they liked it. If they didn't, they could live separately." Mi Yu was busy, so was Han Yu. No one could blame the other. Han Yu thought it was ridiculous. "Why?" Mi Yu smiled. She looked at Han Yu with undisguised ambition. "Your Excellency, don't you understand your own situation? You are extremely favored, but you are also extremely dangerous. I can help you and protect you. At the same time, I can borrow your power. This is supposed to be a mutually beneficial thing. Why don't you agree? I heard that the former madam of your house is not well behaved. If there is a proper mistress, she will think twice, right?" Han Yu was speechless. After a while, Han Yu said, "To be honest, according to the Ministry of Personnel, your promotion is a sure thing." Mi Yu said, "But it's not enough." "Not enough?" Han Yu said, "I can't help you with anything." He didn't think that Mi Yu was someone who needed to go through the back door. How long had it been since she became an official and became the inspector of Ningzhou? In just a few years, she had walked a path that others might not finish in a lifetime. "Of course I don't need your help. His Majesty trusts and values you, Han Wenbin. This is what I value." Mi Yu said and added, "As long as we are husband and wife in name, it will be enough. But whether it is in name or in reality, it depends on fate." Han Yu left with a gloomy face. At this time, a graceful woman walked out from behind the screen. The woman sat beside Mi Yu and massaged her shoulders. "That Excellency, doesn't look like he will agree." Mi Yu smiled and said, "Why not?" The woman was one of her ex-husband's concubines. She was also willing to redeem herself and leave with Mi Yu. "But look," Mi Yu said, "just wait. In a few days, His Majesty will come forward to make peace." The woman was surprised. "Why?" Mi Yu said, "He has made too many enemies. It seems that he has a strong background, but the wind in the court is always changing. Who knows if his classmates who were laughing with him a few days ago will become his enemy in a few days. How many people have been hurt by his reform of the law? Many people are thinking about him. The woman said, "Then His Majesty wants to make peace," Miyu said, "of course to protect this precious egg." As expected, Miyu would definitely rise to a high position. But she still felt that it was not enough. She really wanted to be at the top of the world. A small ningzhou couldn't satisfy her ambition. The woman looked at Miyu and sighed. "But, you don't have to get married," Miyu said, "even if we get married, we can live our own lives. He is an excellent shield. So am I." She and Hanyu were not young people in their 20s. They knew what they wanted. "Do you think I am wronged?" In the eyes of ordinary people, marriage is a big event that will affect their whole life. But if I get married again, it will be my third marriage. When it came to getting married, it was a matter of familiarity the first time, familiarity the second, and familiarity the third. It doesn't matter whether we get married or not. What matters is how we live our lives. Miyu's effort was equal to her gain, so she didn't feel wronged. If the gain was greater than the effort, then it was a profit. The woman was not optimistic about it. A month later, an imperial edict was issued. She was dumbfounded. Han Yu's ex-wife, Mrs. Tao, and Miyu's ex-husband were also dumbfounded. All the civil and military officials in the court were also dumbfounded. Master Yuanjing went to visit his students at his old age. Han Yu was not worried as expected, nor was he happy to be a groom. Instead, he was very calm. "Things are not like what you are worried about, Master. I get along well with that person." It was not a lie. They really got along well. After a conversation, they found that many of their interests overlapped. It was not love between a man and a woman, but it was not a problem for them to live together. They were more like like-minded friends than husband and wife. The two of them had indeed been friends for nearly 30 years. Han Yu's only grudge was the group of concubines in Miyu's backyard. "Are you raising concubines or daughters?" On Miyu's 50th birthday, Han Yu gave her concubines 16 gifts. However, at the birthday party, he found that all the women in Miyu's room were strangers. They were all gentle and sweet to her. She was living a better life than the emperor. "Did your Majesty know?" Mikan said, "This old one likes to raise daughters. It's not like I've given you a single copper coin." Han Yu was speechless. Did he feed those 16 gifts to the dogs? Genius. 1 second to remember my address. Mobile version. Chapter 1854. The spring rain was so noisy that it was hard to fall asleep. Miku tossed and turned in bed from the second half of the night until dawn. She was a light sleeper and had many nightmares, so she woke up after an hour. "What time is it now?" The maid on night duty answered, "Madam, it's just past 7. "It's only 7? Hearing the way the maidservant addressed her, Miku suddenly remembered that she had spent the night in the Han Manor, so it could be considered as her home. The maid asked, "Madam, do you want to get up now?" Miku answered, "Yes." Maidservants came in one after another, helping Miyu wash her face, tidying up her hair, and even giving her an exquisite massage to relieve her headache. "Madam hasn't been sleeping well recently. Do you want a doctor to come and take a look?" Miku propped her elbows on the dressing table and pretended to sleep for a while to relax her tired mind. "No need. It's the same problem every year. I'll be fine after a few days." Miku was working in the capital now. She spent most of her time in her own residence and only a few at the Han residence. Although she didn't stay much, the courtyard was still well equipped. It was bustling with people and didn't look cold at all. The maid tied her hair into a loose bun so it wouldn't hurt her scalp. Her makeup was also much simpler than usual. She looked at the phoenix eyes in the mirror and asked in surprise, "Why is it so simple today?" If she remembered correctly, this maid was an expert in all kinds of makeup that was popular in the capital. Miku would sometimes complain about makeup that was too flashy. Even though she didn't look old and looked to be in her early 30s, her makeup was too thick. Today was a rare day. The maidservant said, "Yesterday, old master reminded me that madam prefers a more simple and unadorned one these days." Miku was taken aback for a moment, then smiled and said, "As expected of the famous Han Wenbin, you are indeed meticulous in your actions." His success wasn't without reason. It could be seen from every little detail in his life. Every year, on this day, Michu's mood would become very gloomy, especially on this day, because it was the death anniversary of her first husband. After dressing up, Miku looked at the woman in the mirror who looked to be in her late 20s and felt a little better. "Madam, San Langjun heard that you were here, so he came to pay his respects." Mikan said, "Let him come." When she arrived at the main hall of the main courtyard, the young man who looked like a ball of childishness was waiting for her. "Your son pays his respects to mother." Miku said, "Rise. Is the academy's rest day today?" Han Chi stood up and sat on the seat to Michu's right, then said seriously, "Today, the academy will still have classes." Mikan frowned. "Class? This kid is skipping class? That shouldn't be the case." Han Chi was a rather well-behaved child, so well-behaved that he didn't have his own opinions. How could an obedient child do such a disgraceful thing like skipping class? Wasn't he afraid of being beaten up by his father? Han Chi said, "A few days ago, father applied for half a day of classes for me. He said it was to accompany mother." Michu, all right. She had to admit that there was indeed something praiseworthy about a person who was able to make it through the chaos of the world to where he was now and rise up step by step. In that case, will accompany mother to Shangfua Temple on the outskirts of the capital today. Shangfua Temple was originally a temple in Hejian County, but His Majesty later allocated funds to build one in the outskirts of the capital. It was said that the old monk in the temple had taught His Majesty. Even though His Majesty didn't believe in Buddhism and had tried to curb the development of Buddhism and was more inclined towards Taoism, it didn't affect the incense burning in Shangfua Temple. Michu also donated some money to the temple and held a few water and land dharma meetings to pray for the dead. Nowadays, the world was peaceful, but there were always places where people had to be careful when they were outside. Han Chi brought enough guards and went all the way from the inner city to Shangfua Temple on the outskirts of the capital. He didn't run into any trouble. Smiley face angle, no, he was in trouble. As the only child that Han Yu was still raising, Han Chi was truly isolated and had no siblings to share the burden with him. When his parents wanted to teach him something, he could only bite the bullet and do it. For 4 hours, Mi Chu didn't stop asking questions. At first, Han Chi was able to answer fluently, but the more he asked, the more anxious he became. His young and tender face was flushed with embarrassment. "It's so embarrassing, pi omega pi," Mi Chu laughed, "you are still young. This level is already something to be proud of." Han Chi stammered, "Mother, please comfort me. I understand." He realized that he was the only one in the family who didn't study well. Whether it was his brother Han Run, or his brother and sister, their grades in the Golden Scale Academy were all in the top 3 among the dozens of people in their classes. Han Chi was different. He was always in the bottom 50. He didn't inherit anything from his father except for his face. Not to mention his father and now his mother. If it were someone else with strong self-esteem, they would have been anxious to change their temperament, but Han Chi was still slow. Han Yu didn't force him like other parents, or he was so busy with work that he didn't have the energy to be strict with his son. His son didn't become a playboy, which was the biggest contribution to the family. Mi Chu said, "Being good-looking is also an advantage." Han Chi? Mi Chu said, "If you have a bit more knowledge, with that face of yours and your family background, you should be able to become a famous scholar." Han Chi was speechless. He couldn't tell if his mother was praising or insulting him. Today wasn't a big festival, but there were still many tourists in the temple and there were many carriages outside. Han Chi saw a familiar carriage in the parking lot and stopped in his tracks. Mi Chu looked in the direction and found the family emblem on the carriage familiar. Wasn't that the family emblem of Han Yu's ex-wife who remarried? Mother? Mi Chu was also aware of the resentment between Han Yu and his ex-wife. She frowned slightly, but her heart softened when she saw Han Chi's pitiful rabbit face. Let's go. Don't waste time. As soon as he entered the main hall of the Buddhist temple, he saw Han Yu's ex-wife leading a strange young lady. The four of them looked at each other. Mi Chu didn't even move her eyes and walked straight over. Han Chi braced himself and saluted Madame Tao. Madame Tao accepted it with a stiff face, but her eyes were fixed on Mi Chu's face and she clenched the handkerchief in her hand. She snorted and ignored Han Chi. She was about to lead the strange young lady away. Mi Chu reached out her hand and blocked her path. What are you doing? Madame Tao was so angry that her eyes were about to burst into flames. Things had changed with the passage of time. Now she valued other things more than what she used to hold on to. Without the power and status brought by Han Yu, without the protection and halo of the Tao family, she was just a weak and helpless woman. Now, Mi Chu jumped out and took everything she once didn't want. Mi Chu opened the heavy and dazzling golden fan in her hand, the pendant of which was made from the finest jade of the world. She held the fan and covered half of her pretty face. Chi bowed to you. Madame Tao sneered, so what? He is my flesh and blood. He should bow to me. It's none of your business whether I accept it or not. She was Han Yu's first wife, and Mi Chu was just his third wife. Why? Did she want to stop and bow to me? Unexpectedly, Mi Chu smiled and said, I am a second-rank official in the imperial court. Can't a commoner bow to an official? Madame Tao? Han Chi, who was a little sad and wronged. Mi Chu said, Chi should bow to you, and you should bow to me. Madam, you come from a noble family and are well-educated and reasonable. How can you not know this? You don't have the title of honorary lady. Secondly, you don't have the title of honorary lady. Thirdly, your family was convicted by His Majesty as a traitor. If Chi ignored you, I wouldn't have recognized you. Since you've recognized Madam's identity, then the rules should be set. Madame Tao's face turned pale, as if it was covered with a layer of white ash. The young lady behind her was also scared and bowed to Mi Chu first. After a while, Madame Tao bowed to Mi Chu reluctantly and extremely humiliatingly. Get up. I am on leave today, so I can't show my authority. If the imperial censor finds out and reports it to His Majesty, it won't be good. Madame Tao gritted her teeth and her eyes were red. She pinched the young lady's wrist and dragged her away. Should she stay and be humiliated? Han Chi was dumbfounded. Mi Chu said, she is your birth mother. She shouldn't be treated like this. However, I also can't bear the slightest grievance. She had seen many old foxes in the officialdom. Which one of them didn't have a complicated mind? How could she not see through Madame Tao's thoughts? She was just an ignorant and sad woman. Did she really think that the title of Li's first wife could suppress her? Not to mention actual actions, she couldn't even think about it. In the past, Mi Chu wouldn't do this, but today was different. Today was the anniversary of her late husband's death. She didn't want him to see her being wronged. Han Chi lowered his head and said nothing. Mi Chu offered incense and burned some Buddhist scriptures in the side hall. 2 hours passed in a flash. Before leaving the temple, Mi Chu asked the Buddhist monk who cleaned the main hall. Only then did she know that the young lady beside Madame Tao was a concubine she arranged for her remarried husband. In order to win over her husband's heart and to stabilize her position as the first branch, she desperately hoped that the concubine she carefully selected could have a child as soon as possible. Today, she offered incense to pray for a child. The corners of Mi Yu's mouth twitched, and she couldn't help but retort, I can understand praying for good health, but what's wrong with going to a monastery to pray for children? Han Chi was puzzled. Why? Me, you said, don't you think it's ridiculous for a monk to say that the world is empty and seek a child from a monk? Han Chi, if the Buddha heard this, he would cry. Miku was very busy, but she was still better off than Han Yu. She had 3 days off every month. Out of respect for Han Yu, Mikan would occasionally ask about Han Chi's studies and care about his life in the academy. It was Han Chi's first time coming into contact with a woman like Mi Chu, and he quickly felt closer to her than his birth mother, Madame Tao. Han Chi was sent back to the Han estate by the housekeeper. The woman who was massaging Mi Yu's shoulders said, "Third Lang Jun is not bad. He has a pure and kind nature." "What are you trying to say?" The woman said with a smile, "There's no harm in passing him over and putting him under your name. I'm sure the old master will agree." Miku played with the golden fan and said with a smile, "If we do that, Madame Tao will probably vomit blood from anger." The woman said gently, "Everyone has their own fate. This is her fate." To be able to forcefully turn a situation like this into the current situation was also a skill. She prided herself on being smart, but she never saw the truth in her life. Her fate had always been in the hands of others. It wasn't others who wanted to control her fate, but she took the initiative to give it to others. All honor and disgrace were tied to her family, her husband, and her son. Her family was destroyed, her husband was divorced, and her son was estranged. She lost everything, but she still didn't wake up and continued to stubbornly step into the same pit. She wouldn't understand now, and she wouldn't understand why her life was like this in the future. Miku looked at the painting and inscription on the golden fan and said indifferently, "I only hope that there will be fewer women like her in the world." The woman said, "With Madame as a role model, why would those women not be moved?" Miku sneered, "You don't understand. There are always more people who sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor than those who do it themselves. So what if there was a role model? The current emperor was still a woman. As long as getting married and having children is still a way out for women. Women like Madame Tao will still be endless." Miku sneered, "They will only say, 'This is a woman with a good life, it's a pity that she has been married 3 times, no matter how high the position and generous the salary is, it's not as good as them.' Then they will turn around and teach their daughters to work hard to marry better men, and teach their sons to study hard and practice martial arts, so that they won't be inferior to women. No one is a fool. Of course, they know that it's much easier to marry a man in a high position than to become a woman in a high position." The woman didn't understand. Many years later, Hanyu asked her if she wanted to be buried with her late husband. She was dying of old age. Miku smiled, "It's good to be a neighbor with an old man like you. Why bother the dead?" Hanyu sat beside the bed and asked her, "Are you relieved now? Things that I couldn't think through at 17 should be solved at 71. How can my state of mind be the same as now?" Her young man lived in her heart for nearly 50 years. She didn't have the passionate feelings and obsession of the past. Instead, she felt that he was an old friend who had left for a long time. She said, "Hello, and take care." She looked at the sunlight outside the window. Vaguely, he could hear a faint chuckle in his ears. Miku smiled. An old friend finally returned. Please remember the domain name of this book. Jiutian Shenhuang Mobile Version. Chapter 1855. Feng Zhen was nicknamed Prodigal Feng. His life philosophy was, joy should be enjoyed in time, how could it be delayed? This was a free and unruly wastrel who was particular about carpe diem. Others laughed at him for being deviant and not knowing what etiquette was. He laughed at others for working hard all their lives and never having a day of true joy. Such a prodigal naturally couldn't be expected to live a 9-to-5 life. It was already good enough that he wasn't caught skipping work every day. However, the situation wasn't right in the past 2 days. Had prodigal Feng been possessed by someone or something? He actually didn't leave early or arrive late. No, not only did he not leave early or arrive late, but he also arrived early and left late. His brows were full of nervousness and alertness, and his nerves were stretched taut. Could it be that the situation at the front line is tense? Even prodigal Feng, who had always been unrestrained and calm, was so serious. Was it because the situation at the front line wasn't right? When Feng Zhen wasn't paying attention, such rumors quietly spread, causing many fence-sitters to panic. Finally, it reached the ears of the Lord, Jiang Pengji. She frowned. As the Lord, she was the clearest about the situation at the front line. The enemy couldn't withstand a single blow. The situation was intense, and the provisions and logistics were in place. No matter how she looked at it, this battle was a sleeping victory. What was Feng Zhen up to all of a sudden, making everyone so restless? Seeing that the rumors were getting more and more exaggerated, Jiang Pengji couldn't help but grab Feng Zhen and ask him about it. Why haven't you been to Nulu recently to drink and watch dances? The lady boss of the tavern you frequent is still thinking about your money pouch. Feng Zhen. The two of them stared at each other. Feng Zhen suddenly revealed a little grievance that made one's heart ache. This time, it was Jiang Pengji's turn to be confused. She reflected on herself and didn't find any problems with her words. Did it agitate Feng Zhen? The person who went to Nulu all day to drink and watch dances was indeed Feng Zhen. The lady boss of the tavern was also concerned about his money pouch. He used to be radiant when he talked about these things. Why did he look as if he had offended an innocent woman? My lord, I'm afraid I won't be able to go again, Feng Zhen muttered. Please don't urge me to go again. As Feng Zhen's gang of scoundrels, it was perfectly normal for them to go to the women's den to drink and watch a dance together. However, without the tools to commit the crime, Jiang Pengji wouldn't stay there overnight. Ever since they got married, Feng Zhen's personality had changed. He only drank and didn't cross the line. For the two of them, going to Nulu to drink was not so much because they were greedy for the wine there, but because they were greedy for the colors there. Because of this, Feng Zhen was secretly scolded by many people. They said that he was a wastrel who had led the lord astray. Feng Zhen felt that he had been wronged. His lord was just an experienced driver who was familiar with the roads. Why would she need him to take her driving test? Jiang Pengji said, You've changed? Are you preparing to turn over a new leaf? Feng Zhen sighed. My wife is pregnant. The doctor said that her pulse is not very stable. Jiang Pengji understood. So that was why. If that was the reason, she could understand Feng Zhen's choice. It was fine if he wasn't serious normally, but he should pay attention to his wife's pregnancy. This was something he should do as a man. However, that's not right. If your wife is pregnant, then why have you been leaving early and returning late? I won't increase your salary even if you work a few more hours a day. It's better to finish what you're doing early and go home to accompany your wife. Jiang Pengji criticized Feng Zhen. Do you know how much of a joke you've made with your recent series of abnormal actions? Everyone thought that Feng Longzi was acting out of character because the front line was in a tight spot. There were so many people spreading rumors that even I almost believed them. When I investigated the source, it was actually you. Feng Zhen. How could she blame him for this? She was pushing the blame too far. Feng Zhen sighed. It's precisely because my wife is pregnant that I don't dare to go back. After thinking about it, I can only help my lord relieve her of her burdens. Jiang Pengji raised her hand to stop Feng Zhen from bewitching her. Out of 10 words that came out of Feng Longzi's mouth, 8 needed to be carefully considered to be true or false. The remaining 2 were false. Are you willing to be honest? Feng Zhen choked for a moment and said with grievance, It's true that my wife is pregnant that I don't dare to return to the manor. Jiang Pengji didn't quite understand. Feng Zhen was old, his knees were weak, and his body wasn't very healthy. His wife was pregnant after much difficulty, so he should be ecstatic. This was so abnormal. Could it be that the child belonged to old Wang next door? Jiang Pengji couldn't help but raise her eyebrows and recall which family lived next door to Fengzhen's. Fengzhen saw the slight change in her expression and knew that his lord was mistaken. He had to explain in a low voice, "Before this, I had a son named Feng Yi. He was the son that my first wife gave birth to at the cost of her life. Has been intelligent and beautiful since he was young. His temperament is very similar to his mother's." Fengzhen had a son before? Jiang Pengji was very surprised because she didn't know about this before. Listening to Fengzhen's tone, this child should have died young. It was indeed young, and the cause of death was related to Fengzhen. That year, Fengzhen was addicted to hanshi powder. The young Feng Yi didn't know the truth and happened to see Fengzhen after taking hanshi powder. He thought that something had happened to him and hurriedly went to find the housekeeper to save Fengzhen. Who knew that in early spring, the rain would be plentiful and the moss would be lush. Little Feng Yi accidentally slipped off the stone steps and fell into the icy cold pond water. Although he was saved, he caught a serious cold that night and died of high fever. Fengzhen always thought that he was the cause of his son's death and felt regret for many years. Sometimes, he would dream about this intelligent son in the middle of the night and couldn't help but cry when he woke up. He gave up on the idea of having another child, and he was born weak and sickly, so he couldn't have one even if he wanted to. A while ago, his wife, Wan Xiao, shyly and timidly told him that she was pregnant. Fengzhen felt his whole body go blank, as if a cold chill spread from the soles of his feet to his head. On the surface, he was ecstatic, but in his heart, there was an uncontrollable panic and fear. Jiang Pengji was speechless. "Are you afraid that you'll be cuckolded?" As soon as she said this, the feelings that Fengzhen had been brewing were instantly broken. "What are you saying, my lord? My wife and I have a deep relationship, why would I suspect this? The sickly man wasn't someone who was born to be impotent. The low probability of pregnancy didn't mean that there was no possibility of winning. The welfare lottery only had 1 in 100 million. The probability was so low, but there was still the birth of the chosen one every season. Fengzhen had a son, Feng Yi, so naturally, he wouldn't think that he couldn't have a child. So what if his wife was pregnant? Must it be because of old Wang next door? If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't beat his lord, Jiang Pengji, Fengzhen would have fallen out with her on the spot. "Goodbye, our friendship is over." "Then why did you say that you were panicking and afraid?" "You said it yourself, I didn't force you to say it." Fengzhen was speechless. Actually, that wasn't what Fengzhen wanted to express. Your subject is indeed panicking and afraid. If this child can't be kept and dies, he had always thought that he wasn't fated to have children, so his first child, who was so good, was also killed by him. With such a thought, Fengzhen naturally felt an indescribable fear of having a second child. He wasn't afraid of the child itself, but he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to keep this child. He didn't dare to go back and face his wife for a long time, so he could only use work as an excuse to avoid her and give himself time and space to think things through. However, before he could understand this matter, his lord came first, and he even made a fool of himself. Jiang Pengji also understood what Fengzhen was conflicted about. She said, "I come from a humble background, so I can't speak of any great principles, but there is one thing I understand. Since the child has set his sights on you and wants you to be his father after reincarnation, it means that he is satisfied with you. How can you let the child down?" Fengzhen couldn't help but complain, "My lord, what you said is quite touching." Jiang Pengji said coldly, "I can say something even more touching. Do you want to hear it?" Fengzhen was speechless. Jiang Pengji said, "I heard that pregnant women are sensitive and think a lot. You leave early and come back late all day, aren't you afraid that your wife will think too much? Maybe she thinks that you haven't changed, and that you took advantage of her inconvenience during her pregnancy to be seduced by a little demon outside? If the mother isn't good, the child will be even worse. Fengzhen was speechless. He had forgotten about this terrible thing. That day, Jiang Pengji heard that Fengzhen had left early again, an entire 2 hours early. This Feng Langzi is really getting more and more indecent. What if he delays the Lord's business? Jiang Pengji glanced at the snitch. What else can we do? Deduct his salary. Deduct so much that this fellow can't even afford milk powder and diapers. //book//book/:/ You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.